Chapter 24:18. How could there be so many heavenly treasures? It was a huge world that was most suitable for humans to live in, but there was no life at all. I have to say that this was a very strange thing. However, at that time, I was limited by my own experience and didn't realize this point. To me at that time, no one was competing with me for those heavenly treasures. It was a great thing that I couldn't ask for. Countless heavenly treasures could only be enjoyed by me alone. Therefore, my strength improved by leaps and bounds in that new world. Almost every day, I was improving. It's not an exaggeration to say that my improvement at that time was rapid. At this point, Shuai suddenly asked, "What about the person who saved you? Do you still remember what he looked like?" "I don't know. Or rather, I don't know how to describe it." Xiexing smiled bitterly and said, "If I must describe him, it's only his black clothes and his extreme coldness. Next, it's only that tyrannical power that could destroy heaven and earth. It was as if he could destroy a world instantly with just one look. Although I've seen him before and can recognize him if I see him again in the future, if you asked me to describe his appearance, I really can't." She looked at Shuai and smiled apologetically. She said, "Your Majesty, although your cultivation has reached the peak of this world and my strength is not enough to make any judgment about you, I really think that you're still very far away from that person. There's an unreachable distance. Just like the distance between the world I was born in and this heavenly imperial court. Perhaps just one look from that person is enough to make you unable to withstand it." These words were rather blunt. Although Xiexing had tried her best to be tactful, the meaning behind her words was clear. "Shuai, don't think that you're quite impressive in this heavenly imperial court. Compared to that expert I know, you're nothing. You can't even compare to a strand of hair." Unexpectedly, Shuai didn't feel offended at all. Instead, he laughed out loud. He shook his head and said, "That kind of person, in this whole universe, I don't know if there's a handful of them. I'm quite satisfied to be able to compete with him. If he's willing to kill me with just one look, it might be my honor." His tone right now. He was completely like a tolerant and gentle father who was coaxing his naughty little daughter. Xiexing chuckled and said, "Anyway, that person is an ultimate expert who has completely exceeded my understanding of his abilities. After he sent me to that world, he left on his own. I tore a piece of black cloth from his sleeve and tied it around my neck. In the end, that piece of cloth actually became my strongest weapon. In any case, no weapon has ever been able to cut through my cloth belt. No, not to mention being cut off, there was not even the slightest bit of injury. It's as if it's an indestructible supreme divine object. No matter who it's facing, it can still fight." As she spoke, a black strip of cloth appeared in her hand. It was about 3 feet long and was only as wide as a palm. She held it in her hand and it was no different from an ordinary strip of cloth. There was nothing special about it at all. However, as Xiexing injected her cultivation into it, the strip of cloth actually continued to extend, as if it could extend endlessly. At this moment, the cloth belt. It was like a black cloud that filled the entire world and covered the sun. Shuai's calm and gentle eyes finally couldn't help but tremble. Shuai's face turned pale. "It's just a piece of cloth that person tore off casually from his own robe, and it's actually such a heaven-defying divine object?" Shuai didn't believe it and stretched out her hand to tear it. However, she realized that even though she had already used all her strength, this piece of cloth was still completely unaffected. Shuai couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air. She really felt a trace of fear that came from the bottom of her heart. Xiexing smiled and said, "Until I've passed through countless planes, until now, this piece of cloth is still intact. Perhaps, even if it's the end of the world, even if the world doesn't exist anymore, this piece of cloth will still be natural. In that strange world, I succeeded in my cultivation and was able to transform into a human. When I was going through the tribulation of transformation, it was this piece of cloth that protected me and prevented me from turning into ashes. And here, when I decided to shed my demon form and completely transform into a human, it was also this piece of cloth that protected me and completed the whole process of transforming into a heavenly demon. If it wasn't for the protection of this piece of cloth, I'm afraid that I would have died countless times. So when I had the ability to cross the void, I wanted to find my benefactor. Zixieqing said softly. Not for anything else, but to personally say thank you to him. With his cultivation, perhaps if I want to repay his kindness, it's just a simple thank you. After that, I searched for countless planes, as if I was being deliberately guided. I experienced many worlds and also experienced countless battles and dangers. Finally, I arrived at the Heavenly Imperial Court. At that time, after staying in the Heavenly Imperial Court for a period of time, I realized that I had the feeling again, so I set off again. In the end, I finally arrived at the Heavenly Imperial Court. To me, it was just an inconspicuous plane. But it was in that plane that I accidentally encountered space turbulence, and thus lost most of my strength. And the most ridiculous thing was that my benefactor's aura had always been guiding me. After guiding me to the Heavenly Imperial Court, it completely disappeared. I couldn't feel anything anymore. And then, it was the experience until now. Zixieqing's beautiful eyes were filled with deep doubts. I never understood why my final destination was actually there. Shui Leihan was silent for a long time. He thought of the two people he had met that day. One was in black, the other in white. The person in white created the Calamity Sword. And could the person Zixieqing met be the one in black? Thinking of this, Shui Leihan asked a question. I roughly understand. Miss Z, since you don't have parents and don't know your background, then why is your surname Z? Zhang Wang Li Zhao, why did you choose to be Z? Shui Leihan asked. Did you give yourself this name, or did your benefactor give it to you? Zixieqing was stunned. After a while, she said, I don't know. I've been wearing purple since I was young. Of course, this isn't the main reason. It's because, since I was born, I had a feeling that my surname should be Z. Shui Leihan looked at Zixieqing with some relief and let out a long, long sigh. As if he was relieved of something, he smiled and said, Little girl. If I'm not wrong, you were actually born from an egg, right? Chu Yang's mouth twitched. He thought to himself that this Emperor Dongwang seemed to have lost his mind. A ferret was not a chicken, a duck, or a goose. How could there be a ferret that was born from an egg? Shuiqi pursed her lips and squinted her eyes. Big brother, you're muddle-headed. Don't be surnamed Shui in the future. Your surname is Hu. You're not afraid of embarrassing the Shui family, but I am. Shui Leihan didn't even blink. He shouted, If you don't shut up, you can get lost. Shuiqi pursed her lips and muttered, You only know how to show off your power to me. But she shrank her neck and stood aside, not daring to speak anymore. Zixieqing's eyes widened. She looked at Shui Leihan with some surprise and said, You. How did you know? Our ferret clan has never had a case of being born from an egg, but I'm a special case. So I've never told anyone about it. Shui Leihan smiled in relief, laughing to his heart's content. As he laughed, tears suddenly welled up in his eyes. He stood up and suddenly let out a sorrowful howl. His voice rolled out, as if he was venting the pain of 1,000,000 years in his howl. He looked at the sky and murmured, Brother, you've left a trace of your bloodline in the end. There's still a bit of your continuation in this world. After saying this, he suddenly burst into tears of joy and sorrow. Tears flowed down profusely. Shuiqi stood up with a swoosh. Her expression was also very sad. Looking at the crying Shui Leihan, she murmured sadly, When the heavenly emperor of purple clouds, Zihao, died in battle, Big brother only shed tears, but he didn't cry out loud. He hasn't cried for at least 1,000,000 years. What's wrong with him today? However, the smart Chu Yang vaguely realized something. His expression was solemn. When he looked at Zixieqing again, his gaze also gradually became a little strange. That was respect, surprise, and a little admiration. These feelings had nothing to do with the feelings between a man and a woman. Instead, it was because of a loyal soul from 1,000,000 years ago. At this moment, the Lord of the Eastern Royal Heavens, the majesty, dignity, and poise of a ruler of a generation were all gone. As if he had gone crazy, he first burst into tears, inexplicably sorrowful. Then, he laughed loudly, as if he was extremely happy. His laughter pierced through the clouds and split the sky. No one would have thought that this person who was crying and laughing like a madman was actually the current ruler of the Eastern Royal Heavens. Dongwang Shui Lei Han! Zi Xieching was completely stunned by the scene in front of her. Her face turned white and red. Suddenly, she shouted, "You've all got it wrong. There must be a mistake. I have nothing to do with the heavenly emperor of purple clouds. From head to toe, inside and out, we have nothing to do with each other." Shui Leihan laughed and said, "No, you have something to do with each other. You have a great relationship with Zihao, an inseparable relationship." Back then, Zihao had a close female friend who was from the demon clan. Her origin was from the soul-devouring Marten clan. However, although this kind of strange clan had a long life, their reproduction ability was extremely weak. Back then, this demon lady was hailed as one of the 3 great beauties of the demon emperor heavens. Chapter 24:19. Shui Leihan smiled and said, "Soul-devouring Marten is the original name of the demon race, so it's not well known. In the Heavenly Imperial Court, it's mostly known as Purple Marten, Purple Divine Marten, Celestial Marten, and so on. There are many names. But there aren't many who truly understand this kind of race. This is because they do not look any different from ordinary Marten species. Although they have an unusually long lifespan, their bodies are extremely weak, even weaker than ordinary Marten species. However, their intelligence far surpasses that of ordinary demon clan members, and they are practically the top of the demon clan. Besides, there's another difference between this kind of soul-devouring Marten and the ordinary Marten race. When the soul-devouring Marten is born, it's not a fetus but an egg." Shui Leihan smiled lightly and said, "Back then, Zihao and that demon girl were entangled in love and hatred, fighting each other for thousands of years. But no one would have thought that the two of them would actually become a pair of close friends and quarrelsome lovers. It is said that when Zihao was in danger, the demon clan lady rushed to his side from thousands of miles away. She broke through layers and layers of blockades. In the end, when Zi Xiaotian fell, she was still by his side and died in battle before Zihao." Shui Leihan let out a long sigh as he looked up at the sky. They've never stayed together for long periods of time like ordinary couples. They've always been apart more than together, meeting and parting in haste. However, in times of danger, they rushed over from hundreds of thousands of miles away to die together with you and walk through the spring together. And Mo Qingwu's heart trembled. She asked longingly, "May I know the name of this senior from the Marten race?" Shui Leihan's gaze was a little distant. He answered softly, "Her name is Ling Piaoping. People call her Goddess Piaoping." Goddess Piaoping. And Mo Qingwu and Zi Xieching murmured at the same time, "Ren Pingting, a duckweed in the martial world who can overturn rivers and seas. Her heart can move heaven and earth, and her Piaoping sword can frighten gods and ghosts." Shui Leihan said coldly. Ling Piaoping was not only one of the 3 great beauties of the Demon Emperor Heaven. She was also the 3rd expert of the Demon Emperor Heaven, second only to the Demon Emperor and Demon Empress. Ling Piaoping. And Mo Qingwu said softly, "For the Heavenly Emperor of Zishao to have such a confidant and a companion in the afterlife, his life can be considered to have not been in vain." As she spoke, her bright eyes looked at Chu Yang's face and she smiled brightly. Chu Yang's heart. Then, he smiled in response. This gaze seemed to convey a clear message: if one day, you are also at the end of your road like Zihao, I will also die with you like this senior Ling Piaoping. Side by side on the path of the sun, hand in hand on the path to the netherworld. At this moment, Zi Xieching felt an indescribable sense of dizziness. Ling Piaoping. The moment that name appeared, she felt an intense pain that came from the depths of her soul. She furrowed her brows tightly and said, "The difference between us is close to 1,000,000 years, Is it possible? Is it possible? His tone was full of doubt. However, she could vaguely sense that there seemed to be a purple-clothed man in a wide robe with wide sleeves. He had the sun and moon on his shoulders and the stars on his body. His wide shoulders seemed to be able to support the world. That gaze seemed to be able to pierce through the past and present. It was filled with dignity and kindness. He had a dignified and righteous aura, an upright and awe-inspiring aura, an unyielding and lofty character, and an aura of a sovereign descending upon the world. Beside this purple-clothed man, there was a slender and delicate woman in white. Her features were picturesque, and she was a feast for the eyes. She snuggled up to the purple-clothed man like a little bird. Her watery eyes seemed to be able to pierce through time and space and watch her affectionately. That gaze was filled with love, longing, and heartfelt reluctance. Who were this man and woman? The man had a heroic bearing and an unparalleled dignity. However, he did not exist in her memory. As for the beautiful woman, she gave her an indescribable sense of familiarity and closeness. It was as if she had seen her every moment before. However, she was a weak woman. When had she ever seen her? Zhi Xiaqing suddenly felt that something in the depths of her soul had suddenly broken. It was as if a seal that had existed for a long time had cracked open without any warning. An indescribable feeling of sadness suddenly welled up in her heart. Shuai Leihan carefully observed Zhi Xiaqing's expression from the side. He said slowly, "As long as an oviparous soul-devouring ferret lays an egg, it will imprint its own soul mark into the egg to give birth to its offspring. Moreover, she can set the birth time of her offspring. Either she can entrust it to someone else, or she can meet someone else." Shuai Leihan said softly, "All in all, it's not a very difficult thing to let her offspring hatch after a long period of time. Of course, the difficulty of hundreds of thousands of years in between is indeed a little high, but, as long as she has the corresponding heavenly treasure and that strange cave, especially with the help of that mysterious man in black, then everything is not a problem at all. It's just that, what right does she have to be able to ask that person to help her? After that, as the offspring slowly grow up, as the seals on those souls are unlocked, and they come into contact with the inherited skills of their clan, as well as the life experiences of their mother, they use this method to guide their offspring so that they won't go astray. This is a kind of inheritance of the clan's soul. Of course, this is also a kind of preparation for a rainy day. Because, living in such a world where the weak are prey to the strong, they can't guarantee that they will die one day. And they will usually make arrangements for their offspring before they die. This is their nature. It's also the same kind of love that all mothers have for their children. Your current cultivation probably hasn't reached the level that Ling Piaoping reached back then. So, there are some things that you still don't know. And that's also a kind of protection for you. They don't want you to know things that will make you worry too early." Shuai Leihan said softly. "So, for you to know these things today, I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing for you. The main reason is because of me. Today, I've really been too agitated." Shuai Leihan sighed deeply. Zhi Xiaqing's plump lips trembled a little. She said, "That Senior Ling Piaoping. What was the martial technique that she was best at in her life?" Shuai Leihan's eyes were fixed on her. He said softly, "Ling Piaoping's most famous divine technique was a divine technique that belonged exclusively to her. She named it Heavenly Song and Graceful Dance. At that time, it was among the experts of our generation. There was no one who didn't dream of this heavenly song and graceful dance. Heavenly song and graceful dance, in a dreamy and beautiful scene, it allows one to die contentedly, with a satisfied and happy face even in death. This is the most magical part of the heavenly song and graceful dance technique. This technique is somewhat similar to Xia Danqiong's viburnum flower. However, viburnum flower is still a hidden weapon at the end of the day. Heavenly song and graceful dance is a completely different kind of technique in terms of its origin and attribute." Shuai Leihan explained in detail. Zhi Xiaqing seemed to be relieved. She said, "I don't know about this. I've never dabbled in it before." Shuai Leihan said slowly, "Don't be so anxious. I haven't finished my words. Later on, after Ling Piaoping's name shook the world, the people of the world felt that it was a little disrespectful to add the words heavenly song and graceful dance to this beautiful woman. Therefore, they named her Heavenly Song and Graceful Dance Divine Technique. It was respectfully called Tianwu. Shui Leihan said word by word. Then, he turned to look at Mo Qingwu and said softly, "This technique has been extinct in the world for a long time. It's just that not long ago, it actually reappeared in Qingwu. I think it should be you who imparted it to her?" And Mo Qingwu was suddenly stunned. And on the other side, Chu Yang leaped and caught Zi Xieching in his arms. Because the moment the three words Tianwu came out of his mouth, Zi Xieching's delicate body trembled and she actually fell backward softly. She had actually fainted. Everyone was in a flurry and tried to save her. With Zi Xieching's current cultivation, it could be said that she had completely reached a profound level where even if a mountain collapsed in front of her, her countenance would not change. At this moment, to actually be able to shock her to the point of fainting with just one sentence, it could be seen how big of a shock these few words had on her. After a long time, Zi Xieching woke up in Chu Yang's arms. Her face was ghastly pale and her eyes were lifeless, almost as if she was seriously ill. Shui Leihan leaned in front of her face, his face full of concern. "Girl, how are you? Are you feeling better?" That unusual sense of urgency was clearly expressed. There was also a hint of caution in it. For such a situation to happen to Dong Wang, not only was it strange, it was simply unprecedented. "I want to hear, you finished telling this story?" Zi Xieching said softly. "This?" Shui Leihan was a little hesitant. He said, "You're not feeling well now. Why don't we rest for a night and continue tomorrow?" "No need," Zi Xieching said firmly. "I want to hear it now." Shui Leihan smiled bitterly and looked at Chu Yang helplessly, obviously hoping that Chu Yang would help to persuade her. Now, only Chu Yang had this side. Chu Yang spread out his hands. "Don't look at me. What can I do? This is all your own trouble. I can't help you. Besides, you've already provoked my wife to such a state. It's already very brotherly of me not to settle the score with you. Don't be greedy and want me to persuade you." Chu Yang thought to himself, "If I listen to you and dissuade you at this time, I reckon I won't be able to live in the future." Shui Leihan was momentarily stunned. He sighed helplessly, not knowing whether he was lamenting that he had made a bad friend or something else. He frowned and really couldn't make up his mind. He didn't know whether he should tell her or not. Zi Xieching snuggled in Chu Yang's arms, her expression extremely delicate. In Chu Yang's impression, Zi Xieching had always been strong and unyielding. It was undoubtedly the first time that he had seen her display such weakness and helplessness. But at this moment, if Zi Xieching could see herself, she would suddenly realize that her current appearance was extremely similar to the woman she had vaguely felt. Even her current expression and face were the same. Somehow, there seemed to be a man in purple in a loose robe with the sun and moon on his shoulders and the stars on his body. His broad shoulders seemed to be supporting the heaven and earth. His gaze seemed to be able to penetrate the past and present, looking at her just like that. Beside this man in purple, there was a slim and delicate woman in white. Her features were picturesque. She snuggled softly beside him and looked at him affectionately. Chapter 24:20. Seeing that Shui Leihan had actually stopped talking, Zi Xieching leaned into Chu Yang's arms and suddenly smiled sadly. She recited softly, "Heavenly dance, dance of the heavens, the first dance is a dance of heaven and earth. The second dance is a dance of darkness and darkness. The third dance is a dance of the cold moon. The fourth dance moves the power of the universe. The fifth dance moves the vicissitudes of life and death. The seventh dance moves the heavens. Heavenly dance, the first dance moves the heavens." Shui Leihan's lips trembled as he listened to Zi Xieching's soft recitation. His eyes were blank and his face was even more gloomy as he sighed continuously. Is this the heavenly dance? Martial technique formula? Xiexing's limpid eyes stared intently at Shui Leihan's face. But when she asked this question, she paused a few times. She was even a little out of breath. It could be seen how agitated Xiexing was when she asked this question. Shui Leihan's eyes also flashed with extremely complicated emotions. He said softly, "That's right. This is the heavenly dance. Martial technique formula." Xiexing let out a soft moan and almost fainted again. She smiled bleakly and said weakly, "No wonder. There were a few tables and some furniture in that cave. They were all made of top-grade star iron and 7-star sandalwood. However, after I was born, when I learned how to distinguish them, I found that they were all rusty. Some of them had even completely decayed and turned into powder. I didn't know that at that time. I didn't know that those things had already proved that my identity was not ordinary. Could it be that from the time I was placed in that cave until I was born, hundreds of thousands of years had already passed? That's right, if not for the erosion of countless years, how could such things have decayed?" Xiexing muttered to herself unconsciously. It seemed like she was also asking a question. But she didn't know who she was asking. It also seemed like she was answering her own question. The answer was already clear in her heart. Shui Leihan didn't know how to respond to the person in front of him. He could only let out a long sigh. "That's right, beside me. There were also many other things. But when I was born, those things had long been indistinguishable from what they were originally. After so many years, what can last forever?" Xiexing smiled bitterly. Chu Yang could clearly feel it. At this moment, Xiexing was just like a helpless child. She was all alone, walking in this vast world with no one to rely on. Chu Yang thought for a moment. He put more strength into his arms and hugged her even tighter in his arms. He used his body heat and strength to tell her, "You are not alone. Now and in the future, he would never be lonely. You still have me." Leaning against Chu Yang's thick chest, Xiexing seemed to feel a sense of solid support. She couldn't help but shrink deeper into his embrace. Her delicate body actually trembled a little. He was speechless for a while. Xiexing sighed softly and said softly, "I originally thought that I had no parents and was born and raised by the heavens. Just like that, I was left alone in this world, with no one to care for me, no one to love me, and no one to rely on, and no identity or background, so, every time I see other children acting coquettishly in their mother's arms, holding their father's hand and jumping around, I can only be envious. There was one time. When I was slaughtering a tiger tribe, I saw a tiger using its own body to protect a newborn tiger cub. When it couldn't resist, it simply used its own body to receive my attack. It would rather be killed by me. When it didn't let me hurt the cub, I suddenly felt a heartfelt envy, and let them go. That day, after I left, I secretly returned and hid in a dark place. I enviously looked at the cub nestled in the arms of the big tiger, moaning with concern and licking each other's wounds with their tongues. At that time, I even wished that I wasn't that strong person who could exterminate a tribe with a wave of his hand, but that well-protected cub." 2 drops of tears silently fell from Xiexing's eyes. "But such a thing will never happen to me. I will also never be able to experience that feeling. I've finally gotten used to being alone. I've gotten used to facing the storm with my bare hands. I've also gotten used to struggling on my own. When there's a strong enemy, I'll struggle to escape. When I'm happy, I'll drink alone under the moon. When I'm in pain, I'll find a place where no one else is around to comfort myself. When I'm weak, I'll constantly tell myself that in this world there's no one other than myself who can help me, and no one is willing to help me. Because they're not my family, and they're definitely not my parents." Xiexing's voice gradually became agitated, but it was still mixed with a trace of sobbing. "Originally, I was already used to all of this. But now, I unexpectedly found out that I actually might have parents, and my parents were such peerless heroes who had great power over the world and ruled over the heavens." Xiexing said painfully. "This feeling, before I had the time to rejoice, the cruel reality had already told me. If I were their child, I would still be an orphan, still without any relatives or friends, still all alone in this world, Because they had already died millions of years ago. Ha ha ha. Zi Xiecheng smiled bitterly, the tears on her face flowing freely. Such a thing, to me, is so cruel. My lifelong wish is to cry in my mother's arms and act coquettishly, and then hear my father say to me, "No matter what trouble you have caused, Daddy will cover for you." Such a thing, even if it's just for a moment, even if it's just a sentence, I'll be satisfied. But in my life, there will never be such a time again. It turns out that I'm destined to have no one to depend on in my life. Seeing Zi Xiecheng like this, Chu Yang's heart ached. He hugged her tightly and said softly, "No, no, you won't have no one to depend on in your life. You still have me. No matter what trouble you have caused, I will cover for you forever." And Mo Qingwu held Zi Xiecheng's hand tightly and comforted her with tears in her eyes. "Sister Zi, you still have me." At the side, Shui Leihan said softly. But he said firmly, "Yes. Girl, you still have me. As long as you are willing, I will be your father. Girl, no matter whether you are willing or not, no matter what trouble you have caused, I will cover for you. Even if you want this sky to collapse." Shui Leihan raised his head to look at the dusky sky and said softly yet resolutely, As long as you are willing, this night, whether it was for Zi Xiecheng or for Chu Yang, whether it was Chu Yang or Shui Leihan, it was a night of great significance and worth remembering for the rest of their lives." Shui Leihan was emotional. He thought that his brother had left the mortal world just like that, vanishing into thin air and leaving no trace in the mortal world. But he never dreamed that there was still a bloodline left behind. It was only after more than 1,000,000 years that he could see it. Who said that the heavens were heartless? Who said that the heavens were blind? Even the heavens pitied the heroes and blessed their descendants. Because of this surprise, Dong Wang was filled with motivation and gratitude towards the heavens. Zi Xiecheng's agitation was even more understandable. She originally thought that she was destined to be alone for the rest of her life, even though she had Chu Yang as her companion. She was not alone in life, but it was always a regret that her parents were not related by blood. Her life was incomplete, but in this unexpected place she understood the past. Although she was sad that she could not see her parents again, she was also proud of her parents' past deeds. Although she still had regrets in her life, she was no longer incomplete and could hope for a complete life. And the other one was not direct. At most, it could be said to be an indirect party. But Chu Yang was also unforgettable. Because on that very night, Shui Leihan found an excuse to give Chu Yang a good beating. This beating was really earth-shattering. In the end, with a pale face, Shui Leihan said to a certain someone whose face was so swollen that it was almost inhuman, "You fucking big radish. Let me tell you, what is done is done. I can't do anything about it, but remember to treat my niece better in the future. If you dare to bully her, you can try." Chu Yang lay on the ground with tears streaming down his face. "Oh heavens, oh earth, why don't you open your eyes? There is actually such an unreasonable person in the world who inverts right and wrong. Have you figured out who is the one bullying who?" He pounded the ground in grief and indignation. "I thought your brother was a bastard, but it turns out you're even worse. He's a bastard at best. You're a fucking bastard. Why don't you fucking figure out the situation before you speak? Why don't you fucking beat me up for no reason? Can't you fucking be reasonable? Besides, when did she become your niece again? Damn it, Z, how is your brother, but am I not? Why is it that in the blink of an eye you, as the elder brother, actually want to call yourself the father-in-law again? Do you have any shame?" Minister Chu looked extremely aggrieved. "Damn it, I really can't live through this day. Originally, when I didn't have such a backer, I had already been tortured by Zi Xiecheng thousands of times. Torture after torture, torture after torture. Now I have another backer, Dong Wang. This backer is really hard to deal with. This brother of mine will definitely have enough to deal with in the future." There had never been a moment when Chu Yang yearned to be invincible as much as he did now. To be able to speak loudly. "No matter what, we are still men. No matter what, I can't let my wife's family look down on me. Wait until I have enough strength. Chu Yang stared at Shui Leihan from the corner of his eyes. This fellow's identity is constantly changing. Originally, he was Dong Wang, then he became my brother, then he was Dong Wang again. But now, he actually secretly calls himself the father-in-law of mine. Who do you think you are? Fine, I will tolerate you today. Wait until I have enough strength. I will definitely teach you, this fake father-in-law, a good lesson. Chu Yan thought fiercely in his heart. After posting the photos today, I discovered a strange phenomenon. Everyone who pursed their lips and said, "Not handsome. Very ugly. Not as good as me. Just a little bit worse than me." Wait, all these jealous words were from men. Everyone who said that he was so handsome, that he charmed me to death, that he fell in love at first sight. All these were from female compatriots. Chapter 24-21. This night, Shui Leihan sat alone at the peak of the mountain. In front of him was a purple jade table with 3 cups on it. Shui Leihan had one in front of him, and 2 opposite him. Taking out another pot of wine, Shui Leihan smiled and filled the cup opposite him. He raised his own cup and said softly, "Brother, sister-in-law, your daughter. I've found her for you. Sister-in-law, the child has me. You can rest assured." He finished it in one gulp. Then, he spilled the wine on the snow. A water stain appeared on the snow. The water stain gradually seeped down, leaving a wet mark. "Many years ago, we drank like this. I've always wanted to ask you, why must we drink at the peak of the mountain?" Shui Leihan looked at the void, as if Sihao was standing there. Shui Leihan raised his cup and finished it in one gulp. "At that time, you said that I like this feeling of looking down on the world. When I stand at the highest point, I will feel that the whole world is under my feet. Haha. Brother, I don't have this feeling today. I only think of drinking with you, every time at a high point. It's a pity that there's no one here to drink with me now." Shui Leihan sighed softly. He filled it again, finished it, poured it away, sighed, and filled it again. The night was full of wind and snow. Shui Leihan sat at the peak of the mountain and drank for the whole night. He drank until the sun rose in the east the next day. He was still sitting there alone, drinking alone with his brother and sister-in-law from 1,000,000 years ago. Was he celebrating the fact that he had finally found his bloodline? Was it melancholy that the hero was no longer here? Was it pity? Was it reminiscence? No one could say for sure what exactly was going on. In the pine forest at the side, Xueqi leaned against a tree and watched her elder brother drinking alone from afar. Her expression was unprecedentedly serious. He didn't move. It was as if he had become one with the pine forest. After a long time, a long howl resounded through the blue sky. Shui Leihan's voice echoed in the sky for a long time. The heavenly soldiers fought against the purple clouds. Blood stained the battlefield with heroes. What's there to fear when fighting alone? A pillar of strength to be a heavenly sun, abandoning the bones of a hero. Passion turned into a rainbow bridge. Life and death united as family. Drifting heaven and earth accompanied the king. Abandoning his flesh and blood was not his wish. But the war drums in outer space were high. 1,000,000 years of shame. Flesh and blood reuniting is a blessing today. But Dong Wang still exists in this world. Who would dare to look at a girl with cold eyes? To settle the grudges of the past, let's get drunk again. What followed was only Shui Leihan's long sigh. 2 wine glasses were placed on the table. The sky was filled with white snow, and the wine was still warm, with steam rising from it. It was as if there was a couple across from them, raising their cups and drinking with Dong Wang to their heart's content. Zi Xieching leaned into Chu Yang's arms. She actually leaned against him for an entire night in such a weak state that she had never been in before. She didn't cry, she was just a little confused. How could this be? I'd been used to loneliness for so many years. I've been used to being alone. How could I suddenly have parents? How did he suddenly become the descendant of a hero? Why did he suddenly have roots? But, although he had all these, they were long gone. What's more, it's been 1,000,000 years. Chu Yang and the others snuggled together. None of them opened their mouths to speak. They just leaned against each other like this. Both Chu Yang and Mo Qingwu knew that what Zi Xieching needed the most now was actually not comfort. This accident was, of course, a good thing for Zi Xieching. But it was just a little too sudden. As for the complicated feelings of bitterness, no one would be able to understand it. Perhaps even Zi Xieching herself might not know clearly what she was feeling right now. The heavenly emperor of purple clouds. That legendary hero, that unparalleled hero who fought alone until the last moment, was actually her own father? This sudden fact made Zi Xieching somewhat at a loss. But for some reason, her heart that had always been a little adrift, a little unsettled and insecure seemed to have settled down from then on. Although they're no longer around. But I still have a father and a mother after all. It's not that they don't love me, but because of the invasion of the heavenly demons. For the sake of righteousness, they didn't care about me. But before they died in battle, they still made complete arrangements for me, even though it was for the greater good and not for the sake of personal feelings. He still made sure that I was properly settled. I should be satisfied. She thought of that cave, those inexhaustible resources. As Zi Xieching thought about it, a wave of bitterness and happiness welled up in her heart. She couldn't help but reveal a gentle smile with tears in her eyes. At this moment, Zi Xieching was still unusually weak, no longer as elegant as before, but still exceptionally lovable. Chu Yang hugged Zi Xieching, but in his heart, he was thinking, could it be that the heavenly emperor of purple clouds had already sensed the killing intent of the saint, but he couldn't back down in the face of the heavenly demons? His other children had already grown up and had reached the stage where they could fight against the heavenly demons. Only this child was still in the egg, and still needed a long time to hatch. For safety, so he sent her far away? He even set a time limit of 1,000,000 years, almost to the point of paranoia. Actually, it was to ensure that she could escape from the evil hands of the saint? But there was another problem here. Even with Xi Hao and Ling Piaoping's cultivation at that time, they might not have the ability to set the seal to 1,000,000 years. Especially when they were already in the midst of a battle, it was difficult for them to be distracted. In this way, there was another problem. The person who set the seal was someone else. That black-robed man naturally had the ability to set the seal to 1,000,000 years. But how did they invite that black-robed man? This made Chu Yang especially puzzled. He couldn't understand it at all. If that black-robed man was willing to help them settle down their children, why didn't he help them to suppress the heavenly demons? With that black-robed man's ability, he could almost make the heavenly demons disappear with a wave of his hand. But why didn't he help? This obviously didn't make sense at all. He believed that no one could watch a peerless hero die in front of him like this. At least, Chu Yang knew that he couldn't. And since that person could reach such heights, he definitely couldn't, right? One could only walk on the supreme path with a righteous heart. This was what Chu Yang had always firmly believed. Chu Yang frowned, thinking about everything that he already knew. But he also felt that it was full of fog. He couldn't see anything clearly at all, let alone understand. And Mo Qingwu stayed obediently beside the two of them, not saying a word. She just looked at Zi Xieching with concern. The sky gradually brightened. Zi Xieching's emotions also gradually recovered. She straightened her back as she gradually returned to her usual self. She left Chu Yang's arms, combed her hair, and said softly, "I'm fine now." Then she stood up. Her expression became calm and determined again, as if she had resumed the image of the strong big sister Zi, cold and tough, facing the world alone, only leaving her gentleness for the people she liked. How similar was she to the heavenly emperor of purple clouds who led a lone army to fight against the heavenly demons. In the past, I always thought that I was just a rootless duckweed. Now I finally have roots, Zi Xieching said calmly. My parents glory in the past, their heroic deeds, even if they don't stop. But it's only their glory. These have nothing to do with me. Her voice trembled a little. What I can do is to avenge them, pacify the demons and kill all the heavenly demons. We must kill all the heavenly demons! Zi Xieching looked towards the northeast, where Zishao Heavens was. Her voice trembled but was determined. Restore my heavenly palace of Zishao! Of course! Chu Yang saw that Zi Xieching's emotions had recovered. He hurriedly teased her and said, Although my father-in-law is no longer around, the foundation of Zishao Heavens and the whole of Zishao Heavens are naturally left to my wife's dowry. As the saying goes, once you enter my house, you are my family. So Zishao Heavens is naturally mine. Of course, I have to snatch it back. Zi Xieching's face turned red. She said angrily, Are you asking for a beating? Who entered your house? Chu Yan laughed. Whoever answered me is the one. Sooner or later, she has to enter. Why are you embarrassed? Suddenly, he sighed emotionally and said, I didn't expect that I, Chu Yang, would be so lucky to find a wife so casually, and she's actually a noble. Before he finished speaking, Zi Xieching and Mo Qingwu had already joined forces. The two women each gave him a kick without any fuss, landing a solid kick on his buttocks, sending him flying out of the room. The melancholy atmosphere just now was completely wiped out by Chu Yang's ugly jokes. Mo Qingwu said jealously, That's right. Sister, but Ian is the emperor, even more noble than a noble. Sister Zi is also a descendant of the celestial emperor, a genuine noble. Sister Wu is the daughter of the sect master of Beyond the Heaven sect. In the martial world, you can also be considered a standard noble. Only a wild girl from a small family like me is not a noble. Humph. Chu Yang knew that he had made a mistake with his words. He hurriedly smiled apologetically and tried to salvage the situation. He hurriedly coaxed her with a lot of sweet words and mushy terms. Hearing Chu Yang's exaggerated flattery, Zi Xieching and Mo Qingwu both felt their hair stand on end. They rolled up their sleeves and saw that there was already a layer of dense goosebumps on their smooth and jade-like arms. With a slight shake, goosebumps covered the ground. In the morning, when everyone gathered together to eat, everyone's emotions had already calmed down. Shui Leihan looked at Zi Xieching eating, his face full of love and comfort. Zi Xieching lowered her head and ate silently. Shui Leihan suddenly said, Little girl, be my daughter? You're Zi Hao's daughter. Since you're my daughter, I'll let Godfather protect you in the future. You can do whatever you want in the entire Heaven Imperial Court. Even if he's the son of a saint, you can kill him if you want. It's totally okay. Shuiqi coughed and looked at the sky. This bastard. What he said now is really wrong. In order to take in a goddaughter, he actually said that it's okay to kill Master Yan's son. Then he has your nephew. Chapter 24-22. Shuiqi thought that if it wasn't Siena's children, it wouldn't be a big deal to kill them. But if it was Siena's children, then this old man would be killing his own nephews. It was one thing to admit that he had a sister, but nephews, he still had them. Zi Xieching said calmly. No. Shui Leihan nodded with relief. I knew you wouldn't agree. How can Zi Hao's daughter call someone else father? Even I, Shui Leihan, can't do that. Isn't that right? Zi Xieching smiled. I can call you uncle. Upon hearing her words, Shui Leihan was overjoyed and laughed heartily. His originally smooth chin actually grew a long beard in an instant, making him look like an uncle. However, as he laughed, his beard was blown straight. He said, Of course, of course. You can also call me uncle. Ha ha. That's how it should be. Zi Xieching said quietly. Actually, I still prefer to call you Big Brother Shui. She blinked and said, People say that if you marry a chicken, you have to follow the chicken, and if you marry a dog, you have to follow the dog. Although I'm your sworn brother's daughter, now I'm marrying another brother of yours. Of course, I have to follow Chu Yang. Otherwise, I'll drag Chu Yang and the rest of my sisters down by a generation. I can't bear such a sin. Everyone was speechless. They were all shocked by Zi Xieching's playful and joyful behavior. The usually cold and aloof Zi Xieching actually had such a cute side. Big Brother Shui? Shui Leihan's eyes widened and he actually stuttered. He was the only one who didn't notice Zi Xieching's behavior. He was mainly shocked by Zi Xieching's words. What? Zihao's daughter calls me big brother? If that's the case, then I have to call Zihao uncle? You're rebelling, Shui Leihan said angrily. No, no! Absolutely not. How come after 1,000,000 years, my seniority has actually dropped by a generation? Absolutely not, Mo Qingwu said. Big brother Shui. How can you say that? Sister Zi is my elder sister. Even if I call you, I have to call you big brother, yours doesn't count. Shui Leihan's face darkened. Mine definitely counts. It must be calculated. Chu Yang calmly came up to join in the fun. What do you mean by that? It's all your fault. Shui Leihan was furious. With a kick, he sent Chu Yang flying out. It's all your fault for being so perverted. You didn't reject anyone and accepted everything. Now you've implicated me and caused me to be demoted as well. Chu Yang covered his buttocks. The pain seeped into his bones, and he shouted furiously. Shui Leihan, you bastard, just you wait. One day, my cultivation will surpass yours. At that time, I will definitely. Just you wait. When the time comes, do you really have to? Why must it be? Shui Leihan smiled sinisterly, baring his white teeth as he asked Chu Yang. The look in his eyes was very dangerous, and he didn't try to hide it at all. It was obvious. Minister Chu would surely receive a violent beating if he didn't listen to Chu Yang's words. Or perhaps, he would be brutally tortured. Trample? Seeing that he was about to be violently tortured, Chu Yang instantly raised the truce card. With the strong spirit of a wise man knowing when to retreat, he raised his hand and said, At that time, I will definitely give you a proper toast. We will definitely get drunk. After all, we are all brothers. Why would we care about such trivial things? And Mo Qingwu and Zi Xieching giggled when they saw this, their beauty moving. Xueqi looked up at the sky and muttered, This spineless fellow. But she had long forgotten that she was far more spineless than Chu Yang when she was facing her elder brother. Humans always have lower requirements for others than they do for themselves. For a moment, the atmosphere was extremely harmonious. Shui Leihan laughed and turned to Zi Xieching. Good. No matter what you call me, I hope that you will live well, practice well, and then walk well in this world. No matter what you call me. No matter what happens, you must let me know. It's still the same sentence. Even if you kill Holy Monarch only, Di Ho, and all the other children, I will take care of it for you. He laughed and said proudly. The daughter of the heavenly emperor of Zi Shao was born with such a noble status. Even if Zi Hao is no longer here, as long as Donghuang Shui Leihan is still here, she will still be so noble. This point. There is no doubt. Shui Leihan said this sentence extremely domineering and classy. Chu Yang nodded repeatedly at the side, and flattered in agreement. Big brother Shui is right. Big sister Zi is just so noble. Even if Donghuang Shui Leihan is no longer here, as long as I am here, no one will dare to bully you. Even if you kill all the sons of Holy Monarch, Emperor 1, and Empress D, your husband will take care of it for you. Shui Leihan was speechless. What? What do you mean by even Donghuang is no longer here? Are you cursing me to die? Chu Zhang hurriedly smiled apologetically. I'm coaxing my wife, what does it have to do with you? Don't join in the fun. Shui Leihan frowned even more. How dare you say that I'm joining in the fun? Are you itching for a beating again? Chu Yang's face turned sour. Big brother, can't you leave me some face? Your two sisters-in-law are both here. Shui Leihan chuckled. What kind of noodles do you want? Tell me directly. If you don't tell me, how will I know what kind of noodles you want? Chu Yang looked like he wanted to cry but had no tears. After a while he said, The heartless heavens, why do you have to make fun of me, who is affectionate and righteous? Ha! Everyone burst into laughter. Everyone was rather happy during the meal. Shui Leihan finally left a trace of divine sense on Zi Xieching's body. Although he wouldn't feel anything during normal times, as long as Zi Xieching was in danger, Shui Leihan would be able to know immediately and rush over immediately. Everyone could see Shui Leihan's determination to protect Zi Xieching. It was an indescribable desire to protect her. Everyone absolutely believed that if there really came a day where Holy Monarch's son was killed by Zi Xieching, then regardless of whether it was reasonable or not, Shui Leihan would definitely mobilize heaven cover and fight to the death with Holy Monarch's solipsism. Fight to the death. This was Zi Hao's only remaining bloodline. Shui Leihan would definitely not allow anything to happen to her. After this matter finally came to an end, Chu Yang finally asked about another matter that he was concerned about. I say, how do I go back to the heaven continent? This matter. Without a doubt, only Shui Leihan had the right to speak. Because among everyone present, even the entire Heaven Imperial Court, Shui Leihan was the most experienced. You want to go to the Lake of Despair now? Shui Leihan asked him. Yes. Chu Yang nodded and admitted. It's actually very simple. When you reach the East Royal Heavens, I'll open a passage for you. Shui Leihan's face was light. Back then, in order to ensure that the Calamity Sword wouldn't be leaked, I set up space turbulence in the sky above the heaven continent to block the possibility of powerful forces from entering. If you don't go through the passage, I'm afraid you'll be hurt. Zi Xieching's eyes widened. So the space turbulence that almost made me return to my original form was actually set up by you. Shui Leihan looked embarrassed. He rubbed his hands and said, Yes, yes. How would I know that you would go so recklessly? Besides, I didn't know your identity back then. Please forgive me. Sigh. Zi Xieching snorted. In fact, she wasn't unhappy. Because it was because of that period of weakness that she met Chu Yang by chance, and saw this person who was worth entrusting her life to. From this point of view, it could be considered a blessing in disguise. In fact, from a certain perspective, Shui Leihan could be considered as her matchmaker. Girl, take care of yourself. Shui Leihan and Xueqi finally bade farewell. In the white snow, Shui Leihan stood with his hands behind his back and said softly, Girl, your father's purple cloud heavens is still waiting for you. Zi Xieching bit her lips and didn't reply. She only nodded slowly. Shui Leihan laughed and said, I'm so happy! For millions of years, I finally felt the taste of happiness again. Chu Yang, take good care of my girl. I'm going. He rose into the air and in the blink of an eye, he was already 1,000 feet in the air. Xueqi shouted, Big brother, why are you in such a hurry to leave? Wait for me. He jumped up and chased after him. In the blink of an eye, the two figures had already disappeared in the sky. On the quiet snow mountain, Shui Leihan's laughter was still echoing, but he was already nowhere to be seen. Where are we going next? To the East Royal Heavens or back to the heavens? Mo Qingwu looked at Chu Yang and Zi Xieching. Obviously, Mo Qingwu was happy to see the idea of returning to the heavens. After all, to Mo Qingwu, other than her big brother Mo Tianji, all her relatives were in the heavens. If she could go back, she could relieve the pain of homesickness. Zi Xieching pondered for a while and said in a low voice, Chu Yang, accompany Qingwu back to the heavens. I want to go to the purple cloud heavens. Chu Yang was silent for a while and said, We'll accompany you there first. Mo Qingwu also nodded worriedly. With Zi Xieching's current mental state, if she were to go to the purple cloud heavens and something were to happen to her, in that place where heavenly demons were everywhere, it was really unthinkable. Zi Xieching shook her head and said seriously, I want to go alone. Chu Yang smiled and said, I said I want to accompany you, not because I'm worried about you, but because I'm really curious about the purple cloud heavens. Besides, that's the place where my father-in-law fought. I have to go and take a look. Zi Xieching forced a smile. And, Chu Yang said, you may not know, but I've inherited the purple cloud heavenly emperor's legacy, when I was in the heavens. He said slowly. To a certain extent, I'm his successor, or rather, his successor. So I have more reason than you to go and take a look at the purple cloud heavens. Xi Xieching's whole body shook violently. Chapter 24-23. As far as the rules of the martial world were concerned, the significance of being the successor or the successor of one's legacy was no small matter. In terms of the degree of closeness to Zi Hao, Chu Yang, as the successor, was probably above Xi Xieching, the daughter. There had always been a saying that the legacy was passed down to the daughter-in-law and not to the daughter, because the daughter would eventually become an outsider. Although this saying was rather unreasonable, it was true. Chu Yang deliberately pointed this out to Xi Xieching. I'm not only going to protect you. I have my reasons. And they were sufficient. Chu Yang understood Xi Xieching's temper very well. If this girl was determined to go alone, then she could really sneak away and no one would be able to find her. Xi Xieching turned around like a whirlwind and looked at Chu Yang with sparkling eyes. She suddenly took a step forward. You're saying that you've obtained my Heavenly Emperor Purple Cloud's legacy? Ever since she was born, she had never called them father and mother. Now, with Chen Luyun and the Emperor of the East Kingdom, Jun Shueleihan, both of them had proven her identity and background. Although Xi Xieching had long believed in it, she had never doubted it. Moreover, she could also feel that she was indeed the daughter of the Heavenly Emperor of Purple Cloud, Zi Hao, and the goddess of wandering, Ling Piaoping. But she still couldn't say the simple words my father no matter how hard she tried. It's true, Chu Yang said softly. My current tribulation space is actually an evolution of the Purple Cloud Pagoda left behind by your father. And the Heavenly Emperor of Purple Cloud left behind countless purple crystal treasures, including holy crystals and even divine crystals. Xi Xieching's delicate body trembled. She couldn't wait to say, "Let me see." Chu Yang sighed and led Xi Xieching into the tribulation space. At the same time, he gave Mo Qingwu a look. Mo Qingwu followed behind. Sister Xi, wait for me, I want to go in and take a look too. The two girls entered the tribulation space at the same time. Chu Yang sighed silently. Now, he suddenly felt that the responsibility on his shoulders had suddenly doubled. Fighting against the extraterrestrial demons. It was no longer purely for the imperial court and the continent. Now, there was also a personal grudge. The next moment, Chu Yang unexpectedly felt an inexplicable vibration from the tribulation space. It was a violent tremor that almost destroyed one's soul. Chu Yang was gobsmacked. For a moment, he didn't know what had happened inside. Especially when he thought that the two women were inside. Sensing the impending danger, he hastily flashed into the tribulation space. The moment they entered and saw the situation before them, they were shocked. They were completely dumbfounded and did not know what to do. The Purple Cloud Tower, which had completely merged with the Medicine King Palace and the tribulation space, was supposed to no longer exist. At this moment, it separated again and began to spin in the tribulation space. Obviously, it was the separation of the Purple Firmament Tower that caused the violent tremors just now. In fact, it made sense when he thought about it. The Purple Firmament Tower was equivalent to a part of the current realm of tribulation, and its share was quite large. How could the tribulation space not change if it split rashly? As the spinning Purple Firmament Pagoda spun faster and faster, its overall volume grew larger and larger. Slowly, it turned into an indomitable pagoda. The body of the pagoda emitted 10,000 rays of purple light. At the top of the pagoda, a majestic seal slowly rotated. Wherever the purple light from the seal shone, 4 words would appear. Eternal Purple Firmament. At this moment, Mo Qingwu actually didn't know why she was in the room that Chu Yang had prepared for Tai Batian. Now, she couldn't get out and was screaming anxiously inside. Xi Xieching was the only one near the Purple Firmament Tower. At this moment, her delicate body was trembling violently. Standing in front of the Purple Firmament Tower, her eyes were filled with tears as she looked at the shocking changes in front of her. Chu Yang was shocked to see the changes in front of him. He was stunned for a moment, and didn't know what to do. It seemed that Was it because Zi Xieching's entry made the Purple Firmament Tower feel the bloodline of the Purple Firmament Heavenly Emperor? But Chu Yang couldn't care less about whether the Tribulation Space's power would regress or even be destroyed. He only had Zi Xieching in his eyes now. He only cared about her safety. Yet, he couldn't go to Zi Xieching's side. He couldn't even get close to her. In a place where heaven and earth were shaking. Suddenly, a majestic voice sounded. The bloodline returns to fight the Purple Firmament. Seeing this, I should smile. As long as the heavens don't destroy me, I, the Purple Firmament, I'm proud of life and death, I Zi Hao. The unusually majestic voice reverberated in the tribulation space. Although it was only one voice, it reverberated endlessly. It was as if millions of people were shouting at the same time. Although no one could see the person, just hearing this voice made one have the urge to kneel down and worship. Then, the voice paused for a moment and sighed. Since you can activate the Purple Firmament Tower, you must be of my bloodline. I don't know if you're a boy or a girl. I can't see. But since you have the opportunity to come here, it means that your mother's and my efforts back then weren't in vain. The heavens bless the Purple Firmament. The heavens bless the Purple Firmament. This voice was full of relief. At this point, Zi Xieching couldn't hold back her tears anymore. Her delicate body trembled, and she suddenly fell to her knees. She shouted, "Father! Mother!" This was the word that had been lingering in her heart all year long since she was born. But she had never said it out loud. At this moment, she said it so naturally. But the voice was indifferent. It didn't have any reaction to this voice. The voice just now was actually the voice left behind by the Purple Firmament Heavenly Emperor a million years ago. It could only continue speaking mechanically and couldn't really communicate with people. Zi Xieching trembled all over. For a moment, she was overwhelmed with emotions and couldn't control herself. The voice of the Purple Firmament Heavenly Emperor continued, but at this moment, the voice of the heroic Purple Firmament Heavenly Emperor became melancholy, low and tender. Child, you're finally here. I've always hoped that you were a girl. Your mother was very, very beautiful. If you were a girl, you'd definitely inherit her beauty and be very, very beautiful. If you were born a boy, the responsibility you'd have to bear would be too heavy. I once swore to your mother that when you were born, the two of us would definitely wait by your side and let you transform into a human at the first moment. Even if it would exhaust our cultivation, we wouldn't hesitate to do so. It's a pity that I'm destined to not be able to wait until then. Not being able to see your birth and coming to this world with our own eyes is the greatest regret in our lives. My child, I only hope that your journey in this life will be smooth and safe. Now is the time before the war. Purple Firmament is about to face the final battle. Your mother and I are praying for you. This is just a prayer. All of our wishes, placing our hopes on the heavens, is the only thing your mother and I can do for you. Speaking of which, we're really incompetent as parents. I only hope that when you know the truth in this life of yours, when you know your background, don't blame us. We can die in battle. Facing hundreds of millions of enemies, we can die with a smile. But any resentment or grievance you have, regardless of whether we live or die, it's the greatest torture to us. I never blame you. I don't blame you. Zi Xieching knelt on the ground, sobbing uncontrollably. Next, child, come in. Let me introduce you, our home, Purple Firmament, and your father's generation that you need to remember, and your brothers and sisters. I hope that you must remember them, because you have to replace them and live on. Remember, as long as you're alive, you're the Purple Firmament Heavenly Emperor, the Emperor of Purple Firmament, the leader of the 450 million brothers and sisters, the flag that will never be conquered. We'll live together with you. You must live well, child. The Purple Firmament Heavenly Emperor's voice turned from gentle to impassioned, and then back again in an instant, making one feel dejected. Child, since ancient times, perhaps there hasn't been any other child. There's no need to live as heavily as you do. A person carrying the hopes of 450 million. But we have no other choice. You must know your own name. You're called Zhixieching. Perhaps in your perception, this name was changed by you on a whim one day. But actually, I've given you this name a long time ago. No matter if you're a man or a woman, this name will belong to you and will forever belong to you. Z is my surname, Xie, but it's a little extreme. Purple Firmament has been fighting for many years, but none of those righteous emperors who claim to be righteous came to fight. Tian K. Saint also refused to send troops. I'm really tired of the so-called righteousness. So I might as well just name you Xie. As a person, child, you really shouldn't be too honest. You must remember this, never ever. As for feelings, it's the feelings between your mother and me, and also the feelings of Purple Firmament. The feelings of Purple Firmament will be generous and heroic for eternity. Child, you're called Zhixieching. The Purple Firmament Heavenly Emperor was silent for a while, and then he sighed softly. Come, child, your mother has been waiting for you for a long time. Go in and talk to her. Although she can't see or hear you, you can see her after all. This is what I can do for you, the only chance for you to see your mother. Child, cut your finger and use your blood essence to unlock the biggest secret of Purple Firmament Pagoda. Don't use too much strength. Any bit of pain on your body will make your mother, and I feel heartache. Without any hesitation, Zhixieching used her finger as a knife and slashed her index finger. Blood gushed out. The purple mist in the sky surged. The blood that flowed out from her index finger turned into a purple mist and quickly merged into it. Immediately after, the purple fog rolled back and surrounded Zhixieching's hand. It was as if a gentle mother was bandaging the wound of her naughty daughter who had injured her finger. The door of Purple Firmament Pagoda opened suddenly. Let me tell everyone a piece of good news. The web game adapted from World Defying Heavens has reached the final stage of research and development. I can also tell everyone that it's currently being done by the famous 37 Games company in the industry. Under their sincere invitation, I've also taken on the role of the game's worldview architect. I'm just putting my name on it and then giving suggestions. It's actually just a professional criticism. I'll let the game's plot revolve around the original novel and carry out a reasonable adaptation. Currently, there's a plan in the game to let players play the role of the Sword Master, similar to Chu Yang, collect the Sword Calamity, and conquer the heavens. Of course, the new expansion pack will gradually release more plots and other extensions. Everyone can pay more attention to it in the future. I'll also share with everyone if there's any other progress. Of course, for the male compatriots who wish that you can have 4 female confidants and stunning beauties by playing the role of Chu Yang. Ahem. If there's really such treatment. I'll stop writing books long ago. I'm willing to do that and die. Chapter 24:24. A purple mist gushed out. After the door of the Purple Cloud Pagoda opened, it actually transformed into an extremely cozy room. Among them, a beautiful woman was looking at herself with an uneasy expression. She kept asking, "How is it? Is it okay? I don't know if the child will hate me like this." As she spoke, she actually started to cry. My poor child. I actually have to use such a method to see my parents. I really want to hug her, kiss her. Suddenly, she exclaimed, "You've already started?" Then, her expression suddenly changed. It became affectionate and sentimental, but also infinitely warm. "Child, I am your mother." As soon as she said this, the woman's eyes turned red again. She tried to hold it in and choked with sobs. "I don't know what you look like. Do you look more like your father or me? Mother can't see you, mother." Zhixieching looked at the woman in front of her in a daze, but didn't dare to move at all. Although it was just an illusory image, Zhixieching felt infinitely warm in an instant. The moment that gentle face appeared, she felt her heart throbbing. This is my mother. My mother loves me more than anything else. This kind of thought and feeling naturally emerged. Zhixieching, who had never felt all these, was instantly filled with happiness and satisfaction. There was also sadness and bitterness, Although she knew that her mother couldn't see her, she still wanted to smile and let her see. But once the corners of her mouth moved, the tears in her eyes flowed down uncontrollably. A kind of extreme bitterness and sorrow rushed to her heart. For a moment she just wanted to cry out loud. But she didn't dare to cry out loud. She could only cover her mouth tightly and look at her mother without blinking. She let her tears flow freely. To see her mother, this was the only chance in this life. She was afraid that if she moved carelessly, she would destroy the settings of this space and her mother's figure would disappear immediately. So she didn't dare to move at all. She just looked at her in a daze. At the same time, she told herself, "This is my mother, the mother I've never met. I have a mother too. I'm not an orphan. I'm not an abandoned child. My mother loves me more than any other mother in the world. Child, I miss you so much. Mother really missed you so much." The woman couldn't help but cry. Her beautiful face was full of tears. Beside him, the purple firmament heavenly emperor's voice was somewhat helpless as he reprimanded. "You control your emotions. What do you look like? Wouldn't that make the child even sadder?" I couldn't help it." The woman sobbed. She cried, "I want to see my child. I want to tell her that I love her. I really love her. I've dreamed of seeing her for a long time. I've always wondered what our child would be like. How should I love her? How should I teach her? How should I coax her? How should I coax her? Since she was a child, how should she change year after year? I thought about it for a long time. But now, I can only let her see an image. She has never even felt the warmth of a mother's embrace. Mother's body odor. If other people's children can do it, why can't our children do it? See how? Why?" That tearful accusation was actually not an accusation at all. Although this question was filled with grief and indignation, it also revealed heartfelt helplessness. This question made the purple firmament heavenly emperor, see how, let out a long and deep sigh. "Child." The woman finally managed to control her emotions. Perhaps it was Zihao's sentence of increasing the child's sadness in vain that had a decisive effect. "Child, don't blame your father. Your father may never be a good husband or a good father in this life, but he is an absolutely competent heavenly emperor. Your father is a hero. So he is destined to bear much more responsibility than ordinary people. For the purple firmament heavenly emperor, your father has already racked his brains and exhausted his heart's blood." She took a deep breath. "Actually, your father loves you very much, child. Your father is indomitable. Your mother, I, can only accompany him. Standing on the ground and supporting the sky, there is no turning back, no regrets." In the image, the beautiful woman turned her head and looked to the side. Presumably. At that time, Zihao was waiting by the side. Because Ling Piaoping's eyes were filled with tenderness. "Child, you have grown up until now, but you have never felt your mother's existence." The woman was choked with sobs. She paused for a while before saying, "Mother is very guilty. I have let you down. In the room next door, there are things that Mother has prepared for you. This is your father's purple firmament pagoda. As long as you personally come, you can open this hidden secret and obtain the things inside. The things inside were all made by Mother for you. Child, you must be happy, you must be happy. Mother doesn't have much time left. There is still a lot behind. I need you to remember. I don't know if you like the things Mother made for you. And the clothes. If you are a boy, I made the clothes according to your father's figure when you grow up. If you are a boy, you will definitely be like your father, an indomitable hero. I really hope that you are a boy, firm and full of tenderness, if you are a girl. I prepared the clothes according to my figure. You should be taller than me, right? Because your father is very tall. Child, remember to put on some clothes. Mother really wants to put on the clothes for you personally. Go, child." The woman's image froze at that moment. But before it froze, tears flowed out continuously like a fountain. She pleaded, "Let me say a few more words to my child." Xiexing looked at her in a daze and muttered, "Mother! Mother!" The image changed again and turned into another room. Zihao's voice sounded, "This is what your mother left for you. Child, you must always remember that you have a mother. Your mother is the best mother in the world. She has already prepared everything for you." In this room, there was really everything. There were countless clothes, from babies to grown-ups, and clothes that changed from spring, summer, autumn, and winter. The left row was for men's clothes. The right row was for women's clothes. Row after row, there was almost no end in sight. There were also countless cultivation techniques, from easy to difficult, from entry-level, basic, entry-level, high-level, pinnacle, and pinnacle cultivation techniques. There was everything. The only similarity between these cultivation techniques was that their quality was ridiculously high. To say that they were top-notch was an understatement. There were also countless toys for boys and girls to play with. Some were exquisite, some were grand, and some were warm and cute. Any child who saw these toys would laugh heartily and forget all their troubles and worries. As long as an ordinary child could have it, it was here. What an ordinary child couldn't have, it was also here. It was all-inclusive, and had everything. In the innermost position of the room, there was a table with a thick stack of letters on it. Zihao's voice sounded, "Child, these are the letters your mother wrote to you. She recorded in detail what you need to pay attention to in your life. Everything is recorded in them. You can read them in the future. Since the beginning of this battle, when my request for reinforcements was rejected for the first time, I had already expected that the saint would not send any reinforcements to Zishao Heavens. Although I had also tried to send out guards to request for reinforcements, I had always had an ominous feeling in my heart. From then on, your mother had started to prepare everything. She had been preparing until today, child." Xiexing's gaze was fixed on the letter, and she could not take her eyes off it for a long time. There were so many letters, there were more than 1,000 of them. She wondered how much time her mother had used to write every single word. A woman in white seemed to appear in front of her eyes, sitting in front of a desk, writing these letters word by word. As she wrote, she cried. After writing these letters, how many tears did her mother shed? She looked at them in a daze. There was a feeling in her heart, if time stops here and doesn't change, I will be satisfied, but whether she was willing or not, the scene was already changing. One by one, there were people appearing and disappearing here. These were all Zihao's surviving relatives at this point in time. Zihao's voice said, "These are all the members of our family. Those who are still alive for you to see. The others have already died on the battlefield. The descendants of the Z family have never been afraid of battle, never of death. Outside, they are having a decisive battle. Child, let me bring you out to see your uncles. They are all my brothers." Then, the scene changed again. The background had already changed into a big square, with many flags. The wind whistled, the sky was filled with clouds and fog, and the sounds of mountains and tsunamis rose and fell, shaking heaven and earth. The moment Zihao walked out, all the sounds stopped at the same time. There was silence. Only the whistling of the wind remained. "Brothers!" Zihao's heroic and powerful voice suddenly sounded. At this moment, it actually became fierce and high-spirited, mixed with a strong murderous aura and boundless battle intent. "Today, we have a decisive battle tomorrow. Regardless of whether we live or die after tomorrow's battle, as long as we are here today, Zishao Heavens is still in our hands. Slaughter all the extraterrestrial demons!" Zihao was the first to roar. Below, there was a loud roar. "Slaughter all the extraterrestrial demons! Zishao Heavens is ours! Ours! Revenge! As long as there is one person left in Zishao Heavens and one breath left, we must fight to the end. There are no traitors in Zishao Heavens. We can only perish together. Zishao Heavens only has glory." Zihao raised his arm and shouted, "Fight!" Countless people shouted together, "Fight! Fight!" Chapter 24-25. In the boundless sea of people, more than half of them had injuries on their bodies. Some were light and some were serious, but everyone had a stern expression and resolute gazes. There was actually no despair here, no decadence. There was only intense hatred and a strong will to fight. This was undoubtedly a mighty army of iron and steel. Just by looking at this scene, no one would have thought that just one day later, millions of heroes here would forever sleep in purple firmament. Brothers, everyone knows! Zihao's voice became cheerful. I still have an unborn child. And now I've already sent him out. Our purple firmament still has descendants, hope, and a future. Good! There was a deafening cheer. Someone shouted, Let the little prince take back purple firmament in the future. Someone else muttered, How do you know it's the little prince and not the little princess? You can predict the future. Immediately, laughter shook the sky. Today, use time to freeze everyone's words here. At the same time, let your nephew or niece look at you uncles in the future and remember all of you. Remember purple firmament. The purple firmament that belongs to all of us. Zihao roared. Even if he's not born now, he's also a member of purple firmament. Remembering all of you is his responsibility and also his honor. When Zihao's words came out, there was suddenly silence below. The purple firmament that belongs to all of us. Zihao let out a long howl. Turning his head, he instructed habitually. Leng Yu, starting from you, first with your nephew or… Halfway through his words, he suddenly paused. His lips were also trembling somewhat. Someone at the side said softly, Protector Leng Yu has already died heroically in battle. Only an inaudible sigh was heard from the purple firmament heavenly emperor, but his face immediately returned to being cold and hard. He said loudly, Leng Yu is no longer here, then we'll start from you. Whatever you want to say to your nephew or niece, say it directly. Many years later, when he sees this scene, he'll definitely be proud of all of you. He'll also be proud of his father. Because I have all of you. Purple firmament has all of you. When purple firmament was at the end of its road, all of you were with me. We faced death together. Zihao's voice was already somewhat tired, but it was still filled with that kind of arrogance that looked down on the world. When he was not talking to his own child, when facing the world, he was only that invincible heavenly emperor of the purple firmament. A figure slowly walked over. The newcomer was a middle-aged man. He silently stood there for a while and said softly, Child, don't forget, your father is a hero. We all admire him from the bottom of our hearts. Ha, boy, when you see me. Don't you think he's really handsome? Get lost. Child, look at me. I'm your Uncle Yang. I've already killed tens of thousands of skyscraping devils. In the entire purple cloud heavens, other than your father, I'm almost the only one. Stop bragging, it's getting dusty. Child, don't listen to him. He's always fighting and killing. What kind of person is that? Child, this is what Uncle wants to give you. When you get it in the future, you must learn it well. Why would the child of His Majesty the Celestial Emperor care about your little things? Watch me. Good boy, when you grow up, you must be like your father and be a hero. Child, live well. One by one, people walked over, spoke, and then left. However, no one mentioned war or life and death. Instead, they were all relaxed and calm, trying their best to say some light-hearted and humorous things in the way they could think of. In the face of an unborn child, everyone was doing their best to take care of it carefully. Zi Xieching's eyes were glistening with tears as she pursed her lips. He carefully looked at each person, trying his best to memorize each and every one of them. Finally, someone walked forward. He looked like a rough and fierce person. Someone beside him reminded him softly, This. Old Black, be careful, don't be too intense. This man who looked like a chimpanzee nodded. He walked forward and stood there for a long time, but he didn't speak at all. After a while, his lips moved and finally, as if he had exploded, he squeezed out a sentence. Child, you must remember, When you grow up, you must kill that bastard Master Yun to avenge your father and everyone in the purple cloud heavens. You must kill that fake Saint Emperor. Before he finished, someone beside him scolded angrily. Bastard, get lost quickly. What nonsense are you talking about? Let me do it. Then this rough man was kicked out by others. Then, another person squeezed over with a face full of smiles. Child, don't take it to heart. That uncle of yours is actually a lunatic. We don't even know who Master Yun is. And that Saint Emperor, he's not a good person at all. Obviously, these men who were about to walk onto the battlefield, the iron-blooded warriors who were about to walk on the last journey of their lives, were not thinking about leaving hatred for the child. Instead, they hoped that the child would live well, even if they didn't want to avenge him. One by one, they walked forward. However, there were still too many people. There were millions of people. It was impossible to let everyone show their faces. Therefore, while there was still an endless stream of people here, there were already deafening shouts. Child, you must live well. This roar seemed to have reminded even more people. Wave after wave of loud roars gradually merged into one. Child, live well. Don't worry about anything. We have no regrets from birth to death. For the imperial court, we have no regrets. We have no regrets following His Majesty. Child, all of us will pray for you. Live well, live happily. From the beginning to the end, the two words live well appeared the most frequently. And live well was second only to live well. These heroes knew that they would die in this battle, so they really realized what was the most precious thing in this world. First, it was to live. Then, it was to live well. The majestic and intense drumbeats suddenly sounded densely. The whole world seemed to be trembling. Everyone's face became fierce and determined at the same time. Because the time to go to war had arrived. The voice of the heavenly Emperor of Purple Cloud, Zi Hao, suddenly sounded. A loud roar shook the sky, almost completely scattering the dark clouds in the sky. Formation. The sound of the bugle horn sounded. Follow the previous deployment. Go to war. Zi Hao roared. Eternal Purple Cloud. Eternal Purple Cloud. Everyone roared in unison. After today, they didn't know if they would be able to roar this slogan again. The loud sound directly stirred up the dust on the ground. In the distant mountain, there was a rumbling echo. In the image, groups of people and horses rode out neatly. They waved and left just like that. No one turned back to take another look. In the image, Zi Hao's tall and majestic figure stood just like that, watching his soldiers walk out one by one. His face was cold and his gaze was cold and sharp. At this moment, he was no longer the loving father from before, but a cold-blooded and merciless commander. The rumbling sound became more and more distant. The image pulled further and further away. There was a huge gate in the distance. This gate was really big. It was 10,000 feet tall and tens of thousands of feet wide. There were 3 big words on it: Purple Cloud Pass. A clear and anxious voice sounded. Let me go over. Zi Xieching heard and her delicate body shook. Mother. A beautiful figure in white suddenly appeared in the sky. Her figure was slim and her white clothes were as white as snow. Her white clothes and black hair fluttered in the wind. There was a sword in her hand, and the cold light was shining. But Ling Piaoping's gaze only looked there. Her eyes were full of obsession and longing. Her red lips opened slightly and tears flowed down her face. She muttered, Child, forgive Mother. Mother is going to accompany your father. Child, my child, my child. In the image, she stretched out her hands as if wanting to hug her child. But her arms were only half open. They stopped in midair. Tears gushed out crazily from her eyes like a broken dam. Mother's biggest wish is to hug you and see how you look like. Ling Piaoping looked here pitifully. Her eyes were full of powerless longing. Go to battle. Zi Hao's voice was hoarse and strangely nasal, as if he was trying hard to suppress some kind of emotion. But he still gave the order resolutely. His voice echoed in the air. That burly figure had already rushed into the sky and held Ling Piaoping's hand. His back was facing this side. One could faintly see that his thick shoulders were trembling slightly. Was he crying? But he didn't turn around in the end. He only left a tall and straight figure for his child. A figure as broad as a mountain, as if it was going to hold up the sky. So indestructible. So dependable. "Let's go!" Zihao said hoarsely. "Child!" Ling Pioping screamed sharply. Then Zihao pulled her and they flew out at high speed. She, who was flying at high speed, was still stubbornly heading towards this side. She was pulled further and further away. His white clothes fluttered, his black hair danced. That pitiful gaze, that longing, and that final figure seemed to be wedged into Zi Xieching's heart. That pitiful cry was still echoing, but the image suddenly stopped. Zi Xieching was shocked to see the image disappear. She took 2 steps forward subconsciously, as if she wanted to retrieve the image that had disappeared. But she only heard Zihao's tired voice. "Child! This is the last battle. The other party's 3 great heavenly demon kings have already arrived. I won't let you see the battlefield. As for your mother..." Zihao's voice was a little choked. He suddenly stopped. After a pause, he said, "I can only tell you. In the Purple Cloud Heavenly Army now, I'm the only one left." Chu Yang and Zi Xieching were shocked. Only one person left. That was to say, at this time, those countless heroes and Zi Xieching's mother, Ling Piaoping, had all died heroically. Chapter 24-26. Zihao's voice was still going on. 130 million extraterrestrial demons have all turned into dust in Purple Cloud Heavens. And I am still fighting, and I will continue to fight. You must remember. No matter what, do not forget the pride of Purple Cloud Heavens. As long as there is one person left, we can continue to fight. As long as there is a breath left, we must continue to fight. Child, at the last moment, let me sing a song for you. Your mother has always wanted to sing for you, but she... Now let me sing this belated song for you. After a moment of silence, Zihao's hoarse voice sounded. His singing was not pleasant to the ears, and his voice was also extremely hoarse. However, Zi Xieching was listening to him seriously as if she was on a pilgrimage. Purple Cloud Heavens, this is our home. This is our land, our paradise. Who dares to invade? He must come and not return. Zihao sang softly, as if there was no one around. He sang this song with all his heart and soul. Zi Xieching's tears flowed down her cheeks, but she did not dare to make any sound. She did not even dare to choke, for fear that the slightest sound would disturb the singing. This song belonged to her father, and she would only have this one chance to hear it in this lifetime. One could hear that the surroundings of the Purple Cloud Heavenly Emperor were unusually chaotic. And he had also said just now that he was the only one left in Purple Cloud Heavens. In that case, what was the thing beside him? The answer was obvious: extraterrestrial demons. Purple Cloud Heavenly Emperor. Surrounded by millions of extraterrestrial demons, as if there was no one else around, he sang a song for his child tenderly. Although what he sang was actually still a battle song. But that intense fatherly love seemed to have crossed a long river of time and arrived here. In the image, the surrounding noises suddenly quietened down. A voice that was so strange that it did not sound like a human's voice said, "Zihao, Purple Cloud Heavenly Emperor. We are here." Then Zihao's voice exhaled softly and said, "Child, farewell." Then he said softly, "Purple Cloud Tower. I hope you can wait for my child." Then, suddenly, all the sounds began to leave. This should have been the Purple Firmament Heavenly Emperor's ultimate technique that reversed the universe at the last moment to make the Purple Firmament Pagoda leave him. At that moment, a faint long whistle sounded from near to far, but it was filled with a sense of heroism. In the end, it completely disappeared and returned to nothingness. But if one thought about it, one would know that it was definitely the Purple Firmament Heavenly Emperor's final battle cry. Although the duration was very short, and it almost vanished in an instant, in this moment, in that instant. Chu Yang's blood boiled when he heard this long roar. What kind of crazy fighting spirit was that? This aura. It only belonged to Zihao. It only belonged to the purple firmament celestial emperor. The scene finally ended. The doors of the purple firmament tower opened quietly. There was no one inside, waiting for Zi Xieching to enter. Zi Xieching was in a daze for a while. Suddenly, she burst into tears. Father! Mother! Don't leave me! There was no response from the purple firmament pagoda. There was only silence. Chu Yang felt that his face was wet. He reached out and wiped it. Only then did he realize that his face was already overflowing with tears. Zi Xieching was exhausted on the ground. She looked at the purple firmament pagoda that had already opened. But she had no desire to enter at all. Perhaps she was not looking at the purple firmament pagoda that had reappeared, but the scene that had already disappeared. Her father's figure had disappeared. Farewell was eternal. She would never see him again. So what if there were countless treasures in the purple firmament pagoda? There was no father or mother in there. So what if she went in? Since there was no meaning to her, then what was the point of going in? Zi Xieching, who gradually recovered her thoughts, suddenly felt a sense of loss. At the same time, as her heart became more and more upset, there was also a surge of strong and bitter happiness. I finally saw my father and mother. There were also many elders and friends. It turned out that I was really not an orphan. I had a home, relatives, old friends, a hometown, a country. Zi Xieching was obviously smiling, but the tears in her eyes kept falling down. Let's go in. Chu Yang came to her side and said softly. Go in. What's the point of going in? Zi Xieching smiled sadly. They're not in there anymore. Chu Yang took a deep breath and said, They're not in there anymore. Or should I say, they never existed in there. This sentence was undoubtedly very cruel. Zi Xieching felt a burst of anger and looked at him fiercely. Chu Yang completely ignored the beauty's ferocious gaze and continued without a pause. Everything you saw just now, from the beginning to the end, was only an illusory image, a completely unreal image. But from this moment onwards, everything you see after entering the Purple Cloud Tower is real and not illusory. Those are the real things that your father and mother left for you. They will truly accompany you through your whole life. From those things, you can find the aura that your father and mother left for you. Which aura is what you should really cherish? Chu Yang said softly. Zi Xieching's body trembled slightly, and her lifeless eyes suddenly glowed with a little vitality. So, those are the real gifts that they left for you. If you don't accept them, don't feel their aura and feel their sincerity, even if they die, they will feel regret. Chu Yang said solemnly. I'll go now. Zi Xieching suddenly stood up. Vigorous vital energy surged all over her body. She waved her hand to stop Chu Yang from continuing. She said softly, Yes, you're right. That's the real thing that they left for me. And those letters are the real memories that my mother left for me. At the mention of those letters, Zi Xieching suddenly had an impulse to see those letters. With the end of the shadow image and the opening of the purple firmament pagoda, the tribulation space had already regained its peace. At this time, Mo Qingwu also came out of that room, pouting unhappily. When the purple firmament heavenly emperor was talking just now, Mo Qingwu was actually completely blocked out. She had no power of autonomy at that time, and that feeling was really too depressing. Fortunately, everything was over now, and that confining force also naturally disappeared along with it. The three of them entered the purple firmament pagoda, and the moment they entered, Chu Yang was violently shocked. The purple firmament pagoda had changed too much after the transformation. It was directly an infinitely vast space inside, and the large space also contained small spaces. All kinds of materials were dazzling, and everything that one could think of was there. Weapons, armors, from weapons used by children to divine weapons used by adults, martial techniques and inheritances, elixirs and spirit medicines, heavenly materials and earthly treasures. Everything that one could think of could be found here. Just like that, they looked through room by room, and the shock in their hearts became more and more intense. And all of this was prepared at the last minute when Zihao was almost at the end of his rope, and it could already be considered as a treasure trove that had everything one could think of. If a celestial emperor deliberately prepared it during his prime, how exaggerated would it be? That was really something that no one could imagine. Zi Xiecheng touched and played with them one by one, with a doting smile at the corners of her mouth, but her eyes were filled with tears. Each and every one of these cold things, in her eyes, was filled with a strong sense of fatherly love, a strong sense of motherly love. She looked up at the sky, seemingly crying and laughing at the same time, crying and laughing at the same time. For a moment she really felt that her spirit was somewhat hysterical. It was a hysterical surprise, warmth, and also a hysterical melancholy, and missing, endless missing. Father, mother. Thank you? Thank you for preparing all of this for me. Zi Xiecheng closed her eyes and thanked them wholeheartedly. It's all of you, all of this that you left behind, that really made my life complete. At the last moment of my life, all of you are still so considerate of me. I really feel that I'm no longer lonely, no longer wandering. I'm also someone who is missed and cared for. At first, Zi Xiecheng was very anxious to find those letters that her mother wrote to her, but as she looked through room by room, her mood gradually calmed down. All of these were prepared by her father. Perhaps her father's love was not as direct and gentle as her mother's, or even full of dominance. But it was this dominance that made Zi Xiecheng feel the happiness of being disciplined by her parents. Chu Yang, say, if my father was still around, would he hit me when I'm naughty? Zi Xiecheng tilted her head and asked, with a face full of reverie. He would definitely hit you hard, Chu Yang said with certainty. She really didn't know where his confidence came from. He would hit you until you couldn't take care of yourself. Humph! Zi Xiecheng snorted. And Mo Qingwu chuckled. Chu Yang doesn't understand at all. A father may hit his son with a stick, and it's also possible that he would beat him to death, but towards his own daughter, he would never be ruthless. At most, he would just reprimand a few words. He would have to think for a long time before saying a harsh word. How would he hit you? Chu Yang rolled his eyes. How do you know this? Has your father ever treated you like this? This sentence instantly offended the two women at the same time. Humph! And Mo Qingwu and Zi Xiecheng snorted at the same time, turned their heads and walked forward hand in hand. Finally, they reached the room where the letters were left. That room was at the very end, at the very end. It was a big room, or more accurately described as a big warehouse. When the three of them walked to the door, Zi Xiecheng seemed to have a premonition of something, and her delicate body trembled slightly. Chapter 24-27. Chu Yang sighed softly. He stretched out his hand and the door opened gently. A dazzling array of clothes of various colors came into view. She had seen this image before in the previous scene. However, the feeling of seeing the virtual image and seeing the real thing was completely different. At this moment, Zi Xiecheng was stunned as if she had been struck by lightning. There were faint bloodstains on the first few pieces of baby clothes. That should have been caused by her mother's hand when she was sewing the baby clothes due to her lack of proficiency. Zi Xiecheng squatted down and gently touched the bloodstains on the clothes. She said softly, Mother! Mother! She walked over step by step. It could be seen that Ling Piaoping was getting more and more proficient in sewing clothes. However, there were so many clothes here. Even if it was made by a peerless expert, it would still take a lot of time. Because a peerless expert did not mean that she was a peerless sewing expert. Every stitch and thread was a mother's ardent love and care for her child. They were all filled with deep love and devotion, also, the guilt of not being able to personally raise her child. She was trying her best to make up for it in this way. She was trying her best to make up for the child that she could not see. She was using everything that he or she could feel. Zi Xiecheng's emotions that had just calmed down suddenly broke down again. She covered her face with her hands and cried bitterly. Ever since Zi Xiecheng was born, there had never been a day where she cried so many times like today. Or rather, she had never cried before. But in this room that was filled with her mother's aura, Xi Xiecheng cried bitterly. Her heart was broken, and she was hovering between life and death. Chu Jiang quietly held Mo Qingwu's hand. He gently retreated. He gently closed the door and left Xi Xiecheng alone inside. This room only belonged to Xi Xiecheng alone. At this moment, although she was sad, although she was in pain, although she was bitter, but what Xi Xiecheng needed most was to be alone. With her mother. With her mother's aura alone in this room. Quietly interacting with each other, and being alone. Although Chu Jiang could not bear to do this. But this was the only way. At the same time, he also realized one thing: from now on, this room would probably become Xi Xiecheng's sacred place. An unshakable sacred place. But was it a good thing or a bad thing for Xi Xiecheng to keep this room? Chu Jiang could not understand. The benefits were obvious. It was tough and tiring. She could come in. This was her mother's embrace. Here, he could vent some of the grievances in his heart, and disperse much of his depression. At the very least, it was a place to reminisce. However, the disadvantages were equally obvious. If Xi Xiecheng's heart was always in this room, if she could never walk out of this state of mind, she would never be truly happy in this lifetime. And Mo Qingwu could understand Chu Yang's worries. She said softly, "Don't worry. Sister Z is so strong, she will definitely walk out on her own. Furthermore, I believe that the Purple Firmament Heavenly Emperor did not arrange such a place just to make his daughter sad. How could a big shot like him not consider this? This kind of thing can't be rushed. We can only take one step at a time." And Mo Qingwu looked at Chu Yang encouragingly. "That's the only way. I hope your idea comes true." Chu Yang sighed and nodded. The two of them left the tribulation space and began to travel at full speed. He sped all the way to Xi Shaotian. Now, the primary goal was to fulfill Xi Xiecheng's wish. But along the way, in the first 10 days, Xi Xiecheng did not come out. She just stayed quietly in that room filled with motherly love. No one knew what she was doing. But at this time, no matter what, they could not disturb her. They could not bear to disturb her. Although Chu Yang and Mo Qingwu were very worried, they did not dare to go in and persuade her. If they did, it would be counterproductive and not beautiful. Seeing Xi Xiecheng now, Chu Yang could not help but think of his own past. In the past, he was like Xi Xiecheng, not knowing who his parents were. But he was happier than Xi Xiecheng. He had a master, a junior brother, a senior sister, and later on, he found out about his identity. His parents were still alive, but Xi Xiecheng now. This also led to the dullness of the journey. Chu Yang didn't even tease Mo Qingwu anymore. One must know that teasing Mo Qingwu in the past was one of Chu Yang's greatest joys. He used to tease Mo Qingwu and make her blush, pout, and chase after him. Along the way, it was really like chasing the stars and the moon. With the speed of these two high-level saints, they had already left Ink Cloud Heaven's territory in a few days. Flying above the ocean that separated one side of the world and the other side of the world, the two of them had already crossed the Demon Emperor Heaven's territory and crossed the Mist River. They entered the East Royal Heaven that they had not seen for a long time. The two did not stop at all and rushed all the way to the northeast. On the 17th day, there was already a sense of desolation. Chu Yang made a rough estimate, and was actually shocked by himself. He had already brought Mo Qingwu and rushed for no less than 300,000 miles. They had crossed 4 big worlds and finally approached the legendary border of Purple Cloud Heaven. Here, it was almost tens of thousands of miles of desolation. Every few hundred miles, there was a relatively eye-catching road sign and stone tablet. The nearest one wrote, 7,300 miles ahead is the Fallen Area. Fallen Area! Looking at these 3 words, Chu Yang suddenly felt an extremely strong anger rising from his heart. What was a fallen area? That was Purple Cloud Heaven. Although it had fallen temporarily, but that was still Purple Cloud Heaven. How did it become a fallen area in the eyes of these officials? Although he logically agreed that there was nothing wrong with the officials putting up such a notice board, Chu Yang still couldn't accept it emotionally. The place that such a peerless hero had once fought and defended with his life was actually in the eyes of others. It had become a fallen area. What a bullshit fallen area. Chu Yang stood in front of the nearest road sign and stone tablet for a long time. Suddenly, he used his fingers like a knife and drew. His finger pointed. Stone chips flew and many words slowly appeared on the stone tablet. Chu Yang added a paragraph of his own words on the stone tablet. Although Purple Cloud Heaven has now become a fallen area, this is still the place where heroes had once fought bravely. Those heroes who had once fought could also smile and feel no guilt when faced with this so-called fallen area. But those who did not participate in the battle and watched coldly from the sidelines, although they were still alive, their hearts, they had already fallen long ago. Those places are the real fallen areas. The ones who have truly fallen are the people's hearts, not Purple Cloud Heaven. Then, Chu Yang signed his name. Chu Yang! Even though he was filled with resentment, he still couldn't vent his anger. However, he could only let out a heavy sigh. At this moment, there was a sudden movement in the tribulation space. There was movement on Zi Xieching's side. Chu Yang hurriedly let her out. At this moment, Zi Xieching was dressed in white, but it was not the style she usually wore. The style she was wearing now was more reserved and more elegant than the original one. This should be the clothes that Ling Piaoping had made for Zi Xieching back then. There was no sadness or joy on Zi Xieching's face, only calmness. In fact, there was a faint satisfaction and gentleness. She was like a completely different person from before, but she was definitely not the kind of person who was hysterical because of excessive grief. Chu Yang was stunned for a moment. This was very different from what he had imagined. "What are you looking at?" Zi Xieching smiled sweetly. There was actually some gentleness in her expression. This sentence really gave Chu Yang a shock. Since when did Zi Xieching speak in such a feminine manner? Then, he understood. However, he sighed in his heart and said, "You look like your mother now." Zi Xieching's face was filled with joy. She said, "Really?" Then she turned around and saw the stone tablet in front of her. Her face darkened and she said angrily, "Since when did our Purple Cloud Heaven become a fallen area?" She waved her hand, obviously wanting to destroy this stone tablet. Chu Yang hurriedly stopped her. "Don't be rash." As they were talking, there was a sudden rustling sound in the sky. Someone said sternly, "Who is it? How dare you damage the road sign stone tablet?" Following the voice, a man in black flew over and landed in front of the three of them. This person was tall and had long legs. He was wearing a long black cloak, like a black cloud, but he was extremely majestic. His face was rough, and his whole person looked as if it was made of steel. When he landed, he saw the words on the stone tablet at first glance. After a glance, he was actually stunned. Zi Xieching said coldly, "Purple Cloud Heaven is the Purple Cloud Heaven of the Heavenly Imperial Court. Since when did the people of the Heavenly Imperial Court not recognize Purple Cloud Heaven as a part of the world? Why do they keep talking about fallen areas? What does it matter if such a road sign stone tablet is destroyed?" That man looked at the three of them with an unusually complicated gaze and sighed deeply. He came with a belly full of anger, but after hearing the three of them reprimanding him, he was actually speechless. There was a hint of embarrassment on his bronze-colored face. He said, that. I won't pursue this matter further. You'd better leave this place quickly. Young people, better not come to such a place. Be careful not to get into trouble." As he said, he looked at the road sign's stone tablet again. Finally, there was a look of shame on his face. He said, "This road sign was made by us brothers in the beginning. Our original intention was to warn future people not to step into places already occupied by the extraterrestrial demons so as to avoid getting killed. But we didn't expect that there would be such a flaw. It's our fault." Chu Yang nodded. Just as he was about to speak, he heard Zi Xieching say sternly, "You have good intentions, But have you considered the feelings of the people of Purple Cloud Heaven? Have you thought about the feelings of the Purple Cloud Heavenly Emperor, and the others who had fought for Purple Cloud Heaven till the last moment? Chapter 24-28. If it were you, would you be willing to allow others to call the homeland that you love so dearly a fallen area? Do you know how many unyielding and loyal souls are buried in this area? Which one of them isn't more noble than the people of the Heaven Imperial City who are still singing and dancing now? The burly man was at a loss for what to do. He was speechless for a moment, and beads of sweat actually appeared on his forehead. After a while, he said in a flurry, I'll go back and discuss how to change it. Chu Yang pulled Zixieqing and said, I'll have to trouble you then. However, the words fallen area are indeed not very nice. The burly man smiled honestly and said, Yes, we indeed didn't consider it enough back then. May I ask if the three of you have a deep relationship with the Purple Cloud Heavens? If they didn't have a deep relationship, they wouldn't be so agitated, right? But he didn't expect that among the three people in front of him, one was the daughter of the Purple Cloud Heavenly Emperor, and the other was the inheritor of the Purple Cloud Heavenly Emperor. The only one who wasn't directly related to them was Mo Qingwu, the sister of the Purple Cloud Heavenly Emperor's daughter, the wife of the inheritor, and the exclusive inheritor of the martial techniques of the Purple Cloud Heavenly Empress. Chu Yang didn't answer this question directly. He only looked at the burly man in front of him with undisguised admiration. He smiled and said, There aren't many of you here, right? He paused and said, Or rather, there aren't many people who are still fighting in the Purple Cloud Heavens now, right? The burly man immediately became vigilant. Who are you people? Why are you asking these questions? A kind of warmth rose in Chu Yang's heart. He suddenly thought of a few sentences, opening the reincarnation passage with the body, opening the door to the outer realm, bones as the wall, flesh as the road, blood as the wind, and soul as the sky, sending my brother to the outer realm to fight the extraterrestrial demons, nurturing my brother and reconstructing his physical body, becoming an immortal golden body, helping my brother to dominate the outer realm and achieve immortal achievements, letting my brother enjoy the glory of heaven and earth and receive the supreme glory. As he thought about it, he asked tentatively, Do you know Brother Jie? Upon hearing this, the burly man's expression changed immediately. Who exactly are you? The burly man shouted fiercely. An ominous glint flashed in his eyes as he looked at Chu Yang with a murderous look in his eyes. His hand was already holding the hilt of his sword. It could be seen that the words Brother Rob had seriously touched this big man's psychological defense line. Chu Yang could trigger a life and death battle if he said something wrong. Does it matter who I am? I'm just a junior, so even if I told you, you wouldn't know. Chu Yang sighed. His expression was filled with desolation. I'm just casually asking you a question. You don't have to be so nervous. I'm not your enemy. What Brother Jie? The burly man shouted. What kind of weird name is that? I've never heard of it. There has never been a brother here. He roared loudly. His eyes were filled with murderous intention as he glared at Chu Yang. With a stern voice he said, If it weren't for the fact that you're still young, I would have made you bleed 3 feet today. If you know what's good for you, leave quickly. When you encounter the heavenly demons, don't blame me for not warning you beforehand. After saying this, he suddenly shot up like a meteor and instantly disappeared without a trace. Mo Qingwu looked at the burly man leaving, deep in thought. She said, Chu Yang, do you think he's... Chu Yang nodded deeply and said solemnly, He must be. Apart from them, I believe no one else would have such a big reaction to the words Brother Jie. If he was a native of the Heaven Imperial Court, he wouldn't know what Brother Jie is at all. Deep sorrow appeared on Chu Yang's face. He said, The previous master of the Jie sword. I don't know when this misunderstanding will be resolved. I originally thought that Wu Jueqing had come to the Heaven Imperial Court. Perhaps this misunderstanding has already been resolved. Turns out, the misunderstanding is actually still. The three of them continued forward. After walking for about a few thousand miles, they saw white fog in front of them. It was so dark that they couldn't even see their own fingers. Below them was actually a huge river. No one's divine consciousness could extend in this city of white fog. No one's cultivation could fly in this city of white fog. This kind of place was similar to Misty River, but it was different. The white fog connected the sky above and the river below. There was no end to it. And on this river there was only one bridge. A bridge that was only 30 feet wide. If one wanted to go to the other side, one could only cross this bridge. Otherwise, even if one had the cultivation of a saint, one could only walk across this bridge step by step. On the other side of the bridge, there was a stone tablet. On it were written 5 big words: the first pass in the world. There were no castles or checkpoints. Just this bridge was the first pass in the world. When Chu Yang saw it, he couldn't help but sigh softly. What a great first pass in the world. It lives up to its name. It was indeed the first pass in the world. It was really a pass that one man could hold against 10,000. This was the only passageway from the purple cloud heavens to the other parts of the Heaven Imperial Court. When Chu Yang and the other two stepped onto this bridge, they instantly felt a very strange feeling. Xi Xiecheng couldn't help but say, "If my father could retreat to this side of the bridge and just defend it, wouldn't no matter how many billions of extraterrestrial demons came, they wouldn't be able to cross? Why would my father still fight the enemies on the other side of the bridge?" Chu Yang sighed deeply. "Once you cross this bridge, you're no longer in the purple cloud heavens. With the pride of the purple cloud heavenly emperor, why would he cross this bridge? He would rather die on the other side of the bridge, than return to the east side of the bridge." Xi Xiecheng looked at this bridge in a daze. After a long time, she also sighed deeply. Chu Yang was absolutely right. This was indeed the fundamental reason why the Purple Cloud Heavenly Emperor didn't retreat back then. I'm the Purple Cloud Heavenly Emperor. If I had to abandon my homeland and go to other people's territory to fight, how could I still be called the Purple Cloud Heavenly Emperor? Wouldn't it be better to just call me a stray dog? Although the Purple Cloud Heavenly Emperor wasn't in front of them, his state of mind at that time was still on the verge of appearing. There was no need to have any doubts. The three stepped onto the bridge and walked into the white fog. After walking for less than 3,000 feet, they heard someone in front of them ask, "Who are the visitors? This place is forbidden." The voice was resolute and filled with the tyrannical meaning that there was no room for compromise. Chu Yang frowned. He thought to himself that this wouldn't be easy to get through. Following the voice, a golden light suddenly flashed in the white fog. 3 people flashed out and crossed the bridge, blocking the way. 2 of them had long hair and golden robes while the other was dressed in white. At this moment, they were looking at Chu Yang and the other 2 with scrutiny. "Who are you people?" Perhaps it was because they saw that Chu Yang, Xi Xiecheng and Mo Qingwu were all humans and came from the direction of the Celestial Imperial Court. Furthermore, the man was handsome and elegant while the woman was beautiful and peerless. At one glance, they didn't look like bad people. They had a good impression of them and their tone was more or less gentler. Chu Yang smiled and said, "Everyone has worked hard. The few of us are descendants of the Purple Cloud Heavenly Imperial Court. We want to go over and see our homeland." "Descendants of the Purple Cloud Heavenly Imperial Court?" The white-robed man frowned and said lightly, "You must be joking. There are no descendants of the Purple Cloud Heavenly now. After this first bridge, it will be the battlefield. There are only warriors. And I dare to guarantee that there are no warriors of the Purple Cloud Heavenly." Xi Xiecheng sneered and said, "That's because before you came, the warriors of the Purple Cloud Heavenly had already sacrificed themselves heroically." The white-robed man looked solemn and said, "That's right. Therefore, right now, my brothers and I are fighting in the homeland of the heroes. We can't let down the land under our feet. Every inch of land is stained with the blood of heroes." Xi Xiecheng took a deep breath and her tone became much gentler. "Please make way. Let us pass. Let us see our homeland." The white-robed man looked at Xi Xiecheng with a sharp gaze and asked almost word by word, "But where is your homeland, in the purple cloud heavenly?" Xi Xiecheng was about to explain, but when she thought of the name of the city that she was so proud of, she suddenly felt a sense of pride. She puffed out her chest and said loudly, "My homeland is the Purple Imperial City." Purple Imperial City. The white-robed man's expression changed and became stern. The Purple Imperial City, as early as 1,000,000 years ago, had already turned into ruins with the fall of the Purple Cloud Heavenly Emperor. None of the tens of millions of people of the Purple Cloud Heavenly Emperor were spared. Even the whole family of the Purple Cloud Heavenly Emperor sacrificed themselves heroically. Isn't it a little too boastful for you to claim to be a descendant of the Purple Imperial City? Ha ha! You're blaspheming the homeland of heroes, Xi Xiecheng said. Do I need any proof to say that I'm from the Purple Imperial City? The white-robed man did not relax and said, "That's right. You need proof of identity. If you say that you're a descendant of the people of the Purple Cloud Heavenly Emperor, I can still believe it. But now that you say that you're a descendant of the Purple Cloud Heavenly Emperor, I have to ask clearly. Otherwise, others can go over. Even the people from the various big sects and heavenly palaces who came for the trial can also go over. But only you, miss, can't go over." He smiled coldly. "You mentioned the 3 words Purple Imperial City, and claim to be a descendant of the Purple Imperial City. Whether it's intentional or not, you're blaspheming the most respected person in our hearts. Because you're a fake. And the meaning behind this name can't be impersonated by anyone." Xi Xiecheng was agitated and said, "The most respected person in your hearts? Who?" The white-robed man looked at Xi Xiecheng coldly and said lightly, "There's no harm in telling you. This isn't a secret in the first place. That person is the Purple Cloud Heavenly Emperor who fought alone until his death, Xi Hao." His sharp eyes looked at Xi Xiecheng and his words were even sharper. "Miss, if you want to deceive others, we can't do anything about it in other places, but in this land, there's absolutely no one who can blaspheme the Purple Cloud Heavenly Emperor in front of us." Xi Xiecheng was not angry when she heard that. Instead, she felt gratified and proud. But at the same time, she was also a little depressed. Chapter 24-29. Looking at their expressions, he knew that he had gotten himself into trouble by saying descendants of the Purple Imperial City. Otherwise, he could have just made up a random sect name and pretended to be a member here for the trial, and he could have passed. But only the words Purple Imperial City and Heavenly Emperor of Purple Clouds were a huge taboo. But, even though he had committed such a taboo and was blocked here, he couldn't get angry at all. Because the person they respected the most was his father, whom he respected and loved the most. Xi Xiecheng turned to look at Chu Yang as if asking for help. Chu Yang took a step forward and said respectfully, "The 3 of you are so loyal to your duties that I really admire and respect you. But may I know your names?" The 2 at the side wanted to speak, but the man in white raised his hand lightly. Just a slight raise of his hand, and the 2 at the side immediately stopped talking. The man in white looked at Chu Yang and said dispassionately, "Asking for names, are you trying to build connections? It's a pity that this is useless to us brothers. Young man, Purple Cloud's Heavens is not a place you should come to. Go back to where you came from, lest you lose your life by accident." Although the man in white's voice was calm, his eyes were exceptionally sharp, as if he could see through people's hearts. This kind of gaze reminded Chu Yang of Mo Tianji. Suddenly, Chu Yang vaguely guessed the identities of these people. Although he couldn't name these people, Chu Yang dared to be certain, to be able to guard this first bridge, to assume such an important position, they must be those people. The previous generation's tribulation brothers. And this man in white in front of him. He was very likely the brains of the previous generation's tribulation brothers. He was roughly equivalent to Mo Tianji and Di Wuchou Chang. He was the core figure of the Tribulation Brothers. Chu Yang's mind turned. He said, "Since all of you are so loyal to your duties here and don't let us pass, I can't do anything about it. I just want to ask about a person. I heard that this person also came here a few days ago but hasn't returned. Do you know of such a person? The man in white's eyes flashed. He asked calmly. Who? What's his name? Chu Yang said. His name is Wu Jueqing. At this moment, Chu Yang's gaze was fixed on the faces of the three people in front of him. If Wu Jueqing had been here before, he believed that it was impossible for these people not to know. Regardless of whether these people and Wu Jueqing were brothers of tribulation in the same era or not, they were all once tribulation. There had to be a mutual exchange of information, especially when they were comrades who fought on the same battlefield. Lin Sanji believed that as long as they knew this name, their expressions would change. Even if the white-robed man was able to control his expression, the other two men beside him might not be able to do the same. Chu Yang stared at the faces of the three without blinking. Unfortunately, there was no expression on their faces at all. It was as if he had heard a completely unfamiliar name. What would you a city, Ju City? We've never heard of that name. Chu Yang sighed. From the looks of it, it shouldn't be an act. In other words, it meant that Wu Jueqing hadn't arrived yet. Or perhaps they had already arrived, but had yet to arrive here. Two questions arose in Chu Yang's mind. Firstly, Chu Lur and Mo Tianji had gone to look for Wu Jueqing. Where were they going to look for him? Secondly, how was he going to get past this hurdle? Fight? That was definitely not possible. Even if he didn't consider whether he could defeat them or not, even if he could, he couldn't. These people in front of him were the main battle forces guarding the borders of the purple cloud's heavens. If he injured them, wouldn't that be equivalent to indirectly helping the extraterrestrial demons? Besides, the people in front of him were quite powerful. He might not be able to defeat them. Besides, who knew how many people were waiting ahead along the way? Did he really have to fight his way through? Right at this moment, Xi Xiecheng gritted her teeth, stepped forward and said, How do you know that I'm not the descendant of the Purple Cloud's heavenly Emperor city? Didn't you want evidence? I'll give you evidence. Chu Yang was shocked. He hurriedly said, Don't be rash. What he was afraid of was not that Xi Xiecheng couldn't prove her identity. It wasn't too difficult to prove one's identity. The real problem was that once Xi Xiecheng revealed her identity, who knew what kind of storm it would cause in this world? Now, everything wasn't ready yet. At least, it wasn't a good time now. Xi Xiecheng gritted her teeth and said, What do I have to be rash about? Isn't it just to prove my identity? Is my identity so shameful? Chu Yang smiled bitterly. Your identity isn't shameful, it's too shameful. Of course, to some people, Xi Xiecheng also seemed to belong to the category of shameful. That white-robed man looked at Xi Xiecheng with a hint of mockery at the corner of his mouth. He said, Could it be that your identity is really earth-shattering? It was obvious that he was trying to provoke him. But what he did was really too obvious. He didn't hide it at all, which made the provocation even more effective. At least to Xi Xiecheng, it was very effective and irresistible. Xi Xiecheng said lightly, You don't have to provoke me. I've already decided to reveal my identity long ago. Because I'm full of pride towards my identity. She flipped her palm, and a seal suddenly appeared in her palm. A seal only the size of a finger. But the moment the seal was taken out, it suddenly shone brightly and filled the air with purple gas. A vast aura that only a ruler could have spread out in a mighty manner. The seal suddenly grew in size by itself, instantly becoming the size of a human head. Xi Xiecheng held the seal in her hand. With a bang, the seal landed on the bridge. Suddenly, 4 large words appeared on the bridge deck. Ancient purple clouds! The 3 people opposite her were stunned when they saw the 4 words. They were suddenly stunned and took 3 steps back at the same time. They exclaimed, Purple Cloud's Heaven's Imperial Jade Seal! This seal was a sacred item of the Purple Cloud's Heavens, the Purple Cloud's Imperial Jade Seal that belonged exclusively to the Purple Cloud's Heavenly Emperor, Xi Hao. Ever since Xi Hao died in battle, the whereabouts of this sacred item of the Purple Cloud's Heavens were unknown. But they never thought that it would appear here today. Who exactly are you? The three people looked at Zi Xiecheng with a different gaze. It was no longer disdainful like before. Instead, it was filled with respect and anticipation. The Purple Cloud's Heavenly Emperor's imperial jade seal, other than himself, could only be used by the direct bloodline of the Purple Cloud's heavens. If outsiders got their hands on it, it would at most be an ordinary seal. Only in the hands of Zi Hao and his family would it be able to unleash unparalleled power. Only then could they command the Purple Clouds and not dare to disobey. Zi Xiecheng took a deep breath and said quietly, "The Purple Cloud's Heavenly Emperor, Zi Hao, is my father." When she finally said, "The Purple Cloud's Heavenly Emperor, Zi Hao, is my father," in front of others, Zi Xiecheng's heart was filled with indescribable pride. Previously, Zi Xiecheng had always looked down on the second generation of the rich and powerful. But at this moment, Zi Xiecheng suddenly experienced that feeling. Pride. Because I have a hero as my father. Although he was no longer around, in this world, as long as his name was mentioned, there would be no one who didn't know, no one who didn't know, and no one who didn't respect him. The Purple Cloud's Heavenly Emperor, Zi Hao, is my father. However, the impact of this sentence was far beyond Zi Xiecheng's expectations. In an instant, the attitude of the three people opposite her changed. "Is this true?" someone at the side asked. The man in white shouted angrily, "Shut up! To be able to use the Purple Cloud's imperial jade seal with his own bloodline, if he is not the direct bloodline of the Heavenly Emperor, what else can he be? With such evidence, is there a need for other proof? You idiot! It is indeed the princess." The man in white's gaze became passionate and respectful. Looking at the dazzling purple firmament imperial jade seal, the three people in white knelt down and actually kowtowed respectfully. "Greetings to the senior heroes, greetings to the Heavenly Emperor." The three of them looked solemn. "Please rest assured, Your Majesty. But as long as my brother is here, we will never let the extraterrestrial demons step into the Heavenly Imperial Court." The reason why the three of them were so polite was not to pay respects to Zi Xiecheng, but to show the highest respect to the Purple Cloud's Heavenly Emperor. Only when one came to the Purple Cloud's heavens could one imagine the greatness of the Purple Cloud's Heavenly Emperor. Zi Xiecheng moved sideways to avoid them. She raised her father's imperial jade seal with one hand and accepted their kowtow. For a moment, her heart was filled with joy and sorrow. Pride and sadness, pride and longing, all intertwined together. I am the daughter of the Purple Cloud's Heavenly Emperor. Even after 1,000,000 years, it still shone with boundless radiance. Just like the Purple Cloud's imperial jade seal, which swept the world, was not covered in dust. "Thank you for your kindness," Zi Xiecheng said sadly. "I thought, after so many years, my father's name has long been forgotten by people. No! Definitely not." The man in white stood up with a solemn expression and said solemnly, "The name of His Majesty, the Purple Cloud Heavenly Emperor, will be remembered forever even after another 10,000,000 years. The name of a hero must not be buried, and it will not be buried. Your Highness." The man in white stood up straight. Although he had already confirmed Zi Xiecheng's identity, and had paid his respects to the Heavenly Emperor of Zi Shao, he still did not back down. "Although your identity is already confirmed, it is precisely because of this. All the more reason why you cannot enter." "What? What did you say? Why?" Zi Xiecheng widened her eyes. What did he mean by not letting her in when she was not clear? Now that her identity was clear, she was still not allowed to enter. What was this? "It's too dangerous inside." The man in white laughed bitterly. "Past this bridge is the homeland of the Purple Cloud's heavens. Especially the 3,000 miles in front of the first bridge, there have been constant battles for hundreds of thousands of years." Chapter 2430. In these hundreds of thousands of years, the number of people who have died here, or the extraterrestrial demons, has exceeded at least 100 billion. The man in white took a deep breath. Even a high-level saint may die here at any time. Her Highness is of noble status, And she is also the only descendant of His Majesty the Heavenly Emperor of Purple Clouds. We can't afford to lose her. So, you can't go over. Xi Xiecheng was really helpless. Before she revealed her identity, you guys wanted it. Now that she had won, you guys actually refused to let me go. Even though she knew that the people in front of her had good intentions, she still couldn't let it go. It's like this. Chu Yang touched his nose and smiled bitterly. With his many years of experience, he could tell that among the three people, this man in white was someone similar to Mo Tianji. At the very least, he was at Xie Danqiong's level. And the other two belonged to Dong Wushang and Ji Mo's character. Well, I don't care about anything. Anyway, there's someone who can make the decision. We just have to fight. So, Chu Yang directly filtered out the other two people. He said to the man in white, "It's like this. Her Highness is His Majesty's posthumous child. Well, there's a reason why His Majesty fought the extraterrestrial demons until his death. So, His Majesty set the date of birth to hundreds of thousands of years later. Only recently did she know of her identity and origin." The man in white nodded. I understand. He sighed. Back then, Purple Cloud's heavens fought alone. It's a big mystery. His Majesty was able to make preparations in advance, which can be considered as preparing for a rainy day. I completely understand. Chu Yang had a whole new level of respect for him. This guy's IQ was really not low. This was probably what they meant by listening to the sound of the strings, wasn't it? So, about Her Highness's identity, Chu Yang said. This definitely needs to be kept a secret. The man in white nodded again. Please rest assured. Today's matter, including Her Highness's identity, will definitely not be leaked from the three of us. Chu Yang nodded. I believe in your promise. It's just that I mentioned earlier that Her Highness only knew of her identity recently, so she wanted to come to Purple Cloud's heavens. Not to, understood. It's human nature. The man in white nodded in understanding and continued on Chu Yang's behalf. Your Highness isn't really here to participate in the battle, nor is she here to train, nor is she here to take back the Purple Cloud heavens. She's only here to pay homage to her ancestors, to see the place where her father fought in the past, and to see her own hometown. Chu Yang nodded. You're absolutely right, so that's why we should let you go and fulfill your wish. The man in white nodded. I understand what you're saying, but we still can't let you pass. Chu Yang couldn't help but get angry. He was so angry that his nose was crooked. Brother Qing has said so much, but it's purely a waste of saliva. Why are you like this? Why are you so unreasonable? It's not that I'm unreasonable, but if something happens to Her Highness, no one can bear the responsibility. The man in white said seriously. After crossing the first bridge, there are still 27,000 miles to go until we reach the Purple Imperial City. Back then, His Majesty the Celestial Emperor specially chose the location of the Purple Imperial City at the edge of the Purple Cloud heavens. Do you know how many heavenly demons we might encounter during this 27,000 miles journey? How many battles will we have to go through? What price will we have to pay? Let me tell you, for so many years, no one on our side has ever been able to kill their way to the Purple Imperial City. The man in white sighed deeply. How can we not understand Her Highness' feelings? Could it be that we are really that heartless? If it's possible, even if we have to risk our lives, we'll still escort Her Highness there. Even if all of us die, as long as we can ensure Her Highness' safety, we'll be happy to do it. We even more hope to let the heroic spirits of this land know that the bloodline of His Majesty the Celestial Emperor they're loyal to has returned safely. We even more hope that the heroic spirit of His Majesty the Purple Cloud Celestial Emperor can accept the worship of his direct bloodline. This is tantamount to reuniting the Purple Cloud Celestial Emperor and his daughter. We understand. The man in white sighed deeply. But the problem now is, we don't have the confidence, not at all. We don't even have the confidence to escort Her Highness to the old site of the Purple Imperial City safely. We don't even have the confidence to escort Her Highness back from the Purple Imperial City. Do you understand if I put it this way? Chu Jiang was completely silent. The other party's words were very straightforward, but completely irrefutable. It's human nature for Her Highness to be anxious to pay respects to her father. Besides, we've been fighting on this land for tens of thousands of years. Our feelings may not be much better than Her Highness' feelings right now. But it's precisely because of this that we can't bear any harm that Her Highness may suffer. Even if she loses a single strand of hair, to people like us, it's a great sin and a dereliction of duty. The man in white said seriously. We understand all of you, but we also hope that you can also understand us. Chu Yang realized miserably that not only did he not manage to convince this man in white, he was about to be convinced by him instead. He seemed to have only felt this kind of feeling from Emotianji in the past. May I know your name? Chu Yang asked seriously. Xian Yuan. The man in white smiled. Xian Yuan Chang Kong. Chu Yang pondered for a moment and said, Xian Yuan Chang Kong. A good name. Why do I seem to have heard this name before? Actually, due to the long history of this name, Chu Yang had never heard of it at all. When the sword spirit first introduced it, it only introduced the names of the previous masters of the tribulation sword. It did not introduce the specific identities of the previous tribulations in detail. Therefore, Chu Yang had never heard of this name before. But Chu Yang still firmly believed that this person must be one of the previous tribulations. He frowned as if he was deep in thought. Xian Yuan Chang Kong was obviously interested in his appearance. He said, You've heard of me. That's impossible, right? Our names have never spread outside the Heaven Imperial Court. Chu Yang frowned and thought hard. Not in the Heaven Imperial Court. I think I've heard of it in my hometown. Really? But why can't I remember at this moment? Xian Yuan Changkong's expression suddenly changed. He said somewhat excitedly, Your hometown? Where's your hometown? The other two people's faces also glowed red. They looked at Chu Yang expectantly. Chu Yang said indifferently, My hometown is in the Heaven Imperial Court. Have you heard of that place? This sentence was simply nonsense. But Chu Yang was afraid that if he directly pointed out the key point, the misunderstandings between the previous masters of the Tribulation's sword and Tribulations had not been resolved yet. He was afraid that it would cause unnecessary trouble. For example, the person he just met, so it was necessary to beat around the bush, even if the way was quite melodramatic. But so what if it was melodramatic? As long as it was effective. Heaven Imperial Court. The three people shouted at the same time. The man in white was muttering in a low voice, but the other two were simply excited. You're all people who ascended from the Heaven Imperial Court? It's the two of you. These two were, of course, referring to Chu Yang and Mo Qingwu. Yes. Chu Yang nodded honestly. I'm from the lower three heavens of the Heaven Imperial Court. My mother is from the martial arts clans of the lower three heavens of the Heaven Imperial Court. Fellow countrymen. The two men in gold almost shed tears. They grabbed Chu Yang's hand and looked fervent. So we're from the same hometown. Brother, we were originally from the Heaven Imperial Court. Such a coincidence. Chu Yang's face was full of surprise, even more pretentious. Pfft. Cough. And Mo Qingwu almost couldn't hold back her laughter. She hurriedly covered her mouth and pretended to cough, but it was very fake. How's the Heaven Imperial Court now? What's it like now? The two men in gold surrounded Chu Yang and asked urgently. The man in white was a little helpless about this, but he didn't stop them. His face was still calm, but he also perked up his ears to listen. A single person was actually chatting on the first bridge. As they chatted, the three people invited them warmly. Come. Let's go to our place and have a good chat. Sigh, I haven't been back to the Heaven Imperial Court for tens of thousands of years. I really miss home. They actually led the three people forward just like that. Xi Xieching followed beside Chu Yang with a straight face. She only felt that her heart was so ridiculous that she wanted to laugh. The other party was clearly so determined just now, but the mention of the Heaven Imperial Court completely changed their minds. They actually allowed them to enter their tent. Although there was still a possibility that they would be politely sent out after catching up, after all, there was already a buffer. To Zi Xieching and Chu Yang, with this buffer, it was equivalent to a big step forward. With a good start, perhaps the rest of the matters would be much easier to handle. Chu Yang and the other two followed the three people of the previous generation and walked forward for about 1,000 feet. Suddenly, their field of vision widened a lot. They realized that the bridge here actually extended out horizontally by a large section, and on the extra section of the bridge, there stood a fortress. There was only a passageway below this fortress. Above the passageway, there were actually rooms. Chu Yang couldn't help but feel dizzy. Such a design was really fucking original and unique, a work of the gods. No matter who wanted to pass through here, the people here only needed to wait at ease. When there was nothing to do, they could even sleep, rest, or practice martial arts in their rooms. When there was something to do, they could just come down and hold the fort. The only requirement was that you were a martial artist and could fly, and that was enough. Chapter 2431. However, to build such a house in this area, it seemed that the difficulty was also not ordinary. First of all, divine senses could not be used here at all. It was even more impossible to fly here and there. One could only rely on the most primitive lightness techniques to move around here. In order to build such a magnificent building, besides the huge amount of work involved, who knew how much risk they would have to take? Looking at Chu Yang's expression, the white-robed man Xianyuan Chongkong laughed heartily. We built this house step by step. There are people here all year round. Even if we don't take turns to be on duty, there will still be people standing here alone. Therefore, we might as well build this house. We changed from one person to one person to one person to three people to one person so that we can be companions and chat with each other to get rid of loneliness. That's really a big deal. Chu Yang clicked his tongue in wonder. Building such a house is really difficult. I'm afraid that it's not an exaggeration to say that it's a life-or-death situation. If one were to accidentally fall down, I really don't know where to look for him. Xianyuan Chongkong smiled reservedly. Everyone has been circling between life and death all year round. This little bit of danger is nothing to be afraid of. Actually, the original intention of building this house is to make life easier for everyone in the future. There's no need to give anything in return. We've lived in the land for a long time, and practice makes perfect. Danger can hardly be considered as danger. Chu Zhang said sincerely. I'm saying that you're a bunch of desperados. The two people at the side patted Chu Yang's shoulder and laughed. Well said, we're desperados. They increasingly felt that this guy's words were really to their liking. Xianyuan Chongkong's face was also filled with joy. However, he was also doubtful in his heart. This princess of the purple cloud heavens was the real deal. If she was not a direct descendant of the purple cloud heavenly emperor, she would definitely not be able to activate the purple cloud heavenly emperor's purple cloud tower. There was no need to doubt this point. As for the beautiful lady beside her, she was also very simple and honest. Her temperament would definitely not be crooked. These two ladies could be completely trusted. However, this black-robed man was really somewhat unfathomable. He looked young and tender, but in fact, he was full of inner qualities. It was as if his whole body naturally carried a kind of subduing aura. It was a feeling of déjà vu. It was a pity that he couldn't use his divine sense to observe carefully here. Otherwise, with his eyesight, he would have been able to see some clues. At the very least, he would be able to find out how high this guy's cultivation was. In addition, there was something else that they didn't understand. He had deliberately become friends with his two brothers in just a few words. The atmosphere was joyous and harmonious. Ever since that incident, these two brothers had always been silent, even in the face of Emperor Donghuang's occasional visits. Most of them didn't say a word. How did I get along so well with this guy today? This is really strange. If that was all there was to it, then it would have been fine. After all, they were just looking at each other. This was completely unreasonable. However, what was even stranger was that even though he knew that Chu Yang was deliberately welcoming the three of them, he still didn't feel any disgust towards him. Instead, he was happy to spend more time with him. Wasn't this an extremely strange thing? Xianyuan Changkong faintly had a thought in his heart. This black-robed man who calls himself Chu Yang seems to be very experienced in dealing with people like me? But how is this possible? He is only a few years old. I have tens of thousands of years of cultivation. My temperament has been tempered. How can I be seen through so easily? With a belly full of doubts, he finally came to the room. The burly man in gold actually took the initiative to make tea. Haha! It's rare that fellow countrymen from my hometown come over. I have to take out my fifth brother's precious tea for everyone to taste. Xianyuan Changkong was stunned again. This guy actually doesn't treat this black-robed man as an outsider. You must know that I have spent a lot of effort to accumulate that tea. Usually, only these few brothers can drink it. Now that this black-robed man has come, the elder actually went to take it directly. This display of goodwill is too obvious. No need, no need. Chu Yang laughed. Dear brothers, I think you have been away from the heavenly layer for a long time. I have not ascended for a long time. Before I ascended, I was afraid that I would never be able to drink the tea of my hometown again, so I really brought a lot of tea specialties from the heavenly layer continent. Let's drink it today and try it, to comfort everyone's homesickness. Are you serious? The three of them raised their heads at the same time, their eyes shining. Even Xianyuan Changkong, who had always been profound and wise, had his eyes shining when he heard this. There was a hint of covetousness in his eyes. When these few people first came here, the whole process was full of bafflement. They didn't bring anything over. To put it bluntly, even if they wanted to find something to prove that they were indeed from the heavenly layer continent, they probably wouldn't be able to find it. This guy actually thought of bringing tea up in advance? What kind of explanation is this? Xianyuan Changkong immediately felt relieved. This guy probably ascended normally. He is different from us. As long as he has a space tool with a large capacity, it is reasonable for him to bring more things other than martial arts. Not only did Chu Yang have tea in his tribulation space, but they were all of the best quality. Ever since he saw that the elder ancestor Chu Xiuxin liked tea so much, Chu Yang also fell in love with this stuff. Before he ascended, he had bought a lot of tea. All the famous tea in the heavenly layer was available. It was quite extravagant. When Chu Yang took out a packet of tea, he gathered the water vapor and boiled the tea. When the tea fragrance spread out, the dark green tea rolled back and forth in the teacup. An indescribable and wonderful tea fragrance rose in spirals just like that. The three people opposite him sniffed together, sniffing the long-awaited taste of their hometown. Their actions were a little comical, but Chu Yang and the other two only felt a heartfelt bitterness in their hearts. Such heroic figures, just for one belief, had to stay here, or never return to their hometown for the rest of their lives. Wasn't this also a kind of great cruelty? The three of them smelled the tea fragrance. At first, they were intoxicated, but gradually, they couldn't help but have their eyes turn red. They held up the teacup with infinite care. Looking at the tea in the cup, they were actually speechless for a moment. After a long, long time, the 2 tears in the eyes of the burly man in gold on the left dripped onto the green tea, making 2 ding-dong sounds. Although the sound was very soft, how could it escape everyone's ears? The burly man forced a smile and said, "The tea is really too hot. The dense steam is rising. It's so hot that it's making my tears come out." This sentence was such an inappropriate excuse, but it made the other 2 nod repeatedly, expressing their agreement. The scene in front of them was originally an extremely comical situation. A burly man holding a cup of tea and crying. But Mo Qing Wu and the others didn't find it funny at all. Instead, their noses turned sour, and their eyes were watery. They were almost about to cry. Xianyuan Changkong held the teacup, raised his head, closed his eyes, and sighed deeply. "Yes. It's the tea of my hometown. The tea of the heavenly layer continent. I will never forget this taste in my life. I originally thought that I had already forgotten it. Chu Yang's heart ached. When he reached out again, there was already a space ring in his hand. He passed it to Xianyuan Changkong. This is... There was a look of understanding in Xianyuan Changkong's eyes, but his tone was still filled with disbelief. He couldn't believe that such a surprise would actually happen to him. This is the tea of our hometown. Naturally, it should be drunk by the people of our hometown. Chu Yang took a deep breath. When I ascended to Heaven Imperial City, I brought a lot, except for the part that my mother made for me. I won't take out the rest for you. I collected the rest myself. I'll give them to all of you. In the future, on this purple cloud battlefield, when you're free from battle, feel the taste of our hometown. When you're away from your hometown, you miss the taste of your hometown the most. Xianyuan Changkong suddenly stood up, his eyes red. He received the space ring with both hands carefully, and said in an unusually solemn manner, "Thank you so much. We accept your kind intentions." The other two burly men in gold looked excited, gratified, and a little sad. Looking at the ring, they asked longingly, "How much is inside? How many times is it enough to drink? It's more or less a brother's kind intentions. How much do you care? Even if you can only drink it once, isn't it a great favor? This is the tea of our hometown. No matter how many purple crystals you have, where can you buy it?" Xianyuan Changkong glared at his two brothers, feeling very embarrassed. "These two are too greedy, tea. How much of this thing can you bring with you? At most, bringing a few kilograms is already very good, right? You said that you're giving it all to us, but why didn't you keep half? These two are really useless. No matter how scheming you are, how much you want to know, you have to wait for them to leave and close the door before you look. You just have to shout it out in front of them. You've really lost the face of all of us brothers. There's really not much tea in here. It's really not enough to take out." Chu Yang smiled and said, "At most, it's less than 1,000 kilograms. 2,000 kilograms. Wow!" The three of them exclaimed at the same time. Xianyuan Changkong was also one of those who exclaimed, 2,000 kilograms of tea. What the heck, how big of a figure is this? For these people, even 1 or 2 taels of tea was a rare surprise. That was just wishful thinking. But now, they had 1,000 kilograms. It was simply like a pauper who was so poor that he couldn't even afford to drink noodles suddenly having a mountain of gold. They instantly became nouveau riche. Wow! When they opened the ring and saw the actual inventory inside, the two burly men in gold couldn't help but exclaim in surprise. The taste of happiness instantly spread through their bodies. There's really so much. This isn't a dream, right? Chapter 2432. I won't say anything more. I'll take half a kilogram of it and put it on my bed to drink slowly. The golden-robed man danced with joy. He was so excited that his face was flushed. Drink a cup in the morning, drink a cup before going to bed at night. Xianyuan Changkong was also a little excited, but he still pretended to be calm and said disdainfully, "Can you tell the difference between morning and night in this white fog? Drink a cup in the morning, drink a cup in the evening? You're really good." The golden-robed man was immediately defeated. With these teas as a foundation, the relationship between Chu Yang and these three people warmed up again. Leveled up. Explosive. From strangers to acquaintances, it only took half a cup of tea's time. It was as if they were sitting on a rocket to the point where they could call each other brothers. "Brother!" The golden-robed man on the left slapped Chu Yang's left shoulder. "You're really good. I, Yen Fei, recognize you as my brother." "Thank you." "Ha! Such good tea. Brother!" The golden-robed man on the right slapped Chu Yang's right shoulder. "Not bad. I, Yang Zong, won't say thank you to you. I've put everything aside in my heart." Chu Yang was caught off guard by the two big slaps. So, he fell on his butt with a crashing sound. Although his body could withstand the tremendous force, the chair he was sitting on couldn't withstand it. So, he still sat on the ground. Someone who's but touched the cold ground couldn't help but have black lines on his forehead. Ha! Seeing Chu Yang's embarrassing situation, everyone laughed heartily. The two girls laughed especially, like flowers trembling. Suddenly, there was no longer any sense of alienation between everyone. Brother, tell us quickly, what is Chongtian like now? The three people asked at the same time. Chongtian continent, this story is really long. Chu Yang began to talk tirelessly. The three people listened with great interest. He described the landscape of the mountains and rivers, described the geography of the people, described the customs of the people. Chu Yang's mouth flowed like a river, and he talked endlessly, as if he could go on forever. The three people listened with great interest from the beginning. Slowly, he lost interest and even felt a little resentful. Because this guy was only describing this. He didn't mention anything about the people, geography, or local customs of the Chongtian continent. Or rather, he didn't mention anything that the three of them really wanted to hear. Even. There was no implication at all. Xianyuan Chang Kong was still able to maintain his composure. Although his face was gloomy, he was still listening attentively. However, Yan Fei and Yang Zong could no longer hold it in. After hesitating for a long while, Yan Fei finally stammered. It was as if he was sitting on a hedgehog. He said uncomfortably, "Well, apart from these, are there any other heroic deeds? Or the great war of the century, heroes? Hero? Are you talking about those legends and myths?" Chu Yang's face was full of confusion. "Most of those are just exaggerations. What's there to talk about? Do you want to hear about this?" Yan Fei was dumbfounded and could not help but swallow his saliva. However, he did not dare to say what he really wanted to say. He could only look at Xianyuan Changkong. "When we were together, there would be legends and legends. There are also some legends. Although they're a little exaggerated, they're not too outrageous." Under the urging of his two brothers, Xianyuan Changkong finally opened his mouth unwillingly. However, the moment he opened his mouth, his originally clear voice became a little hoarse, and he even pretended to cough. "At that time, we still remember. At that time, and Xianyuan Changkong said strenuously. "And the legend of Tribulation Sword Master and Brother Tribulation. Those people might not be legends and legends, but they were always the best of the best. I wonder if you've heard of any similar legends?" When he said this, the three of them looked at Chu Yang with burning eyes. Their eyes. Apart from unlimited anticipation, there was also unlimited nervousness, although they were deceived. Although they were deceived for a lifetime. Although they were harmed and almost used to death in the end, however, in the end, they still wanted to know some things. For example, how was their big brother, who had caused their brother's souls to scatter in the martial world? But were there any legends about him? In this battlefield, many of the warriors who were fighting against the heavenly demons were the same kind of people as their brothers. They knew each other's identities, but there was basically no deep communication. Especially when it came to the unbearable past, no one was willing to talk about it. The past was unbearable to recall, but they still wanted to know if their old friends were still alive. Now, Chu Yang in front of them was a person who had ascended. He should be different from the other people who came from the heavenly layer. They didn't know the inside story of tribulation, but they had the courage to ask about it. But of course, they didn't expect that they would accidentally find the person they were looking for. They didn't dare to ask about the previous tribulation. Instead, they asked about the current tribulation Sword Master. "You're asking about this? You're talking about this?" Chu Yang's face showed a sorrowful expression. He said, "This matter is really too tragic. I did deliberately avoid this topic at first. When it comes to the legends and legends of our heavenly layer, we can't skip the legend of tribulation. But this legend is really too tragic, so I've been avoiding this tragic question. But I didn't expect you guys to take the initiative to ask this question." Sigh. "Tragic? Too tragic? What do you mean?" The three of them sat up straight at the same time, their eyes wide open. That matter? That person wouldn't have spread it out himself, right? He should be glorious. How could he be so tragic? And it seems like the whole world knows about it. Now in the heavenly layer continent, almost everyone knows about it. But everyone has the same attitude, which is to keep it a secret. Because every time they talk about it, they feel their hearts ache. In the heavenly layer imperial court, His Majesty Zi Hao, the heavenly emperor of Purple Cloud, is recognized by everyone as a hero. But in the heavenly layer continent, the only legend that is recognized by everyone is the legend of tribulation. Chu Yang sighed deeply, his voice full of emotion. What? Heartache? Legend? Hurry up and tell us in detail. What happened? The three of them felt that their hearts were about to jump out of their throats. They couldn't wait to ask. It's a long story. If you didn't ask, I really didn't want to talk about it again. Such a peerless hero, died so tragically. Even his body died and his Tao disappeared, his soul scattered. Chu Yang sighed again and again. The three of them panted heavily at the same time. Could it be that he was talking about us? Could it be that what happened back then was already known to the whole world? Brother, please, tell us in detail. What is it that could shake the entire heavenly layer? Xianyuan Changkong could tell that Chu Yang didn't want to talk about it. So, he suddenly stood up and bowed. Then, he changed the topic and said seriously, "This matter is very important to us. Please." Yan Fei and Yang Zong asked at the same time. "All right," Chu Yang said solemnly. "Heroes can't be wrong forever. Since you said that this matter is related to you, I'll say it again. But you have to be patient. I'll tell you the whole story in detail, don't worry, we'll definitely be patient." The three of them nodded hurriedly. "We'll be very patient. Speaking of this matter, I'll have to start from the Tribulation Sword Master," Chu Yang said. He was interrupted by Yan Fei. "Ah? The Tribulation Sword Master? The Tribulation Sword Master is already at the Tribulation Sword Master? Shut up." Xianyuan Changkong and Yang Zong looked at Yan Fei fiercely and reprimanded him at the same time. Yan Fei sat down embarrassedly and scratched his head. "Sorry, I'm in a hurry, shut up." The two of them shouted at the same time. "Stop and listen carefully. If you say one more word, get out." Yan Fei lowered his head and didn't say anything. Continue. The two of them turned to look at Chu Yang at the same time. The Tribulation Sword Master of the first generation came from a very ordinary sect in the lower three heavens. He was a handsome young man. When he was only 15 years old, he already became the Tribulation Sword Master of the first generation. Moreover, he was smart, handsome, and elegant. He was really a dragon among men, a peerless talent in the heavenly layer. Chu Yang began to narrate. After hearing this series of praises, the three of them thought, "What's so strange about this? The previous Tribulation Sword Masters were all like this. Otherwise, how could they win the hearts of the people? This Tribulation Sword Master of the first generation brought his brothers and started from the lower three heavens, and so. He turned the tide and saved the day. His loyal heart shone brightly in the sun and the moon, and his spirit shone brightly in the stars." Chu Yang's voice softly described the story that was slightly exaggerated with artistic embellishment. Anyway, the main character of the story was simply a perfect person who was loved by everyone. And Mo Qingwu leaned her head in Zi Xieching's arms, as if she had already fallen asleep. Zi Xieching also buried her face in Mo Qingwu's hair. The two of them were trying their best to control their emotions, but the two of them were already having a stomachache from holding it in. They really had never seen such a shameless and despicable person before. The two girls didn't dare to raise their heads. Once they raised their heads, they wouldn't be able to control the smile on their faces. In fact, they would be exposed on the spot. So, the Tribulation Sword Master came to the upper three heavens. This Tribulation Sword Master was so chivalrous, courageous, righteous, upright, loyal, so and so. Then, he rushed to the upper three heavens. Chapter 24:33. What exactly happened? The three of them listened attentively. Although the things that Chu Yang said might be a little exaggerated, but to them, they still felt that it was reasonable and reasonable. My brothers were probably like this back then. After this tribulation, Sword Master rushed up to the upper three heavens. He was surprised to find that the law enforcement officers, who were supposed to be his greatest support, were now completely opposing him. When the identity of the tribulation Sword Master was exposed, the law enforcement officers and Dharma Supreme of the upper three heavens became even more aggressive. They directly mobilized the power of the whole world to go against the tribulation Sword Master. For a time, the tribulation Sword Master was basically going against the whole world, and the situation was very unfavorable. Chu Yang's voice was heavy. What's going on? How is this possible? The three of them were confused as well. The law enforcers have always been the biggest support for the Master of the Calamity Sword. No matter when, as long as this force exists, it's the personal force of the Master of the Calamity Sword. Why are they against the Master of the Calamity Sword? Something must have gone wrong. Yes, something must have gone wrong. Chu Yang sighed. After many investigations, this first-generation Tribulation Sword Master discovered to his surprise that this Dharma Supreme, who is the head of the law enforcement officers, not only has a superb cultivation, he is also extraordinarily intelligent. What shocked him even more was, this Dharma Supreme actually knows everything about the Tribulation Sword Master and Tribulation Brother. He even knows about the Tribulation Sword technique and those elixirs and pills. It's the heavy elixir, Yan Fei said angrily. He really couldn't stand the fact that this guy's story was full of mistakes. Yes, it's that heavy elixir. In any case, it's an extremely miraculous elixir. Chu Yang readily accepted her advice. He immediately corrected himself. Let's not talk about these details. Hurry up and tell us what's going on. Under normal circumstances, only the Tribulation Sword Master himself knows these things. How did others know? Especially an outsider like the Dharma Supreme? Xian Yuan Changkong couldn't understand. This mystery lasted until the end. It was only during the final battle that the truth was finally revealed. Chu Yang's voice was heavy. This Dharma Supreme is actually one of the previous tribulations. And he's the most irreplaceable think tank. What? The three of them were shocked. They were completely shocked to the extreme. They didn't expect such a strange thing to happen. But Chu Yang immediately stopped talking. Because he realized that there was a loophole in his story that should not have appeared. The fact that the Dharma Supreme's true body was the Wuchou Chang. Chu Yang originally did not intend to announce it to the public. Regarding the Dharma Supreme's mental journey, Chu Yang had always felt very complicated. But it was undeniable that there was also a trace of admiration and a trace of pity. Even though he had done a lot of bad things, and even though he had planned to purge the entire world in the end. But Chu Yang still didn't want to speak ill of him. But now, in a moment of carelessness, he had revealed half of the truth. Chu Yang suddenly stopped talking. The three of them stood up anxiously at the same time. What happened next? What happened after that? What are you trying to do now? How could that Dharma Supreme be the brains of the previous tribulation? How can he go back? What the hell is going on? Why don't you continue? The three of them were so worried that they were about to go crazy. Seeing that they were about to reach the critical moment, this guy actually stopped talking. Wouldn't this make them depressed to death? Yan Fei jumped up and down. He was so anxious that he scratched his head. Say it, little ancestor. Don't tell me that at such a moment you're going to say, what will happen next time? Then I'll definitely suffocate to death. I'm actually choosing my words carefully. I'll continue. Chu Yang had already made up his mind. He continued, and the reason why this former tribulation brother appeared here is to avenge his brothers. Avenge? You mean avenge? The three of them exclaimed at the same time. Because the previous generation of Tribulation brothers actually died in the hands of the Tribulation Sword Master, Chuzhang said. So, this Tribulation brain. At the last moment, he desperately escaped from a place that was said to be mending the heavens. Then, he used all his schemes and tricks. He concealed his identity and became the head of the law enforcement officers, the Dharma Supreme. Everything he did was actually to find his elder brother, the Tribulation Sword Master of his generation, and ask him personally, why? Why? The three of them murmured absent-mindedly. Yes. Why? These three words we also want to ask all the time. But where can we go to ask? But when this brain came back to the world, thousands of years had already passed. In the heavenly realm, that's a very long time. But in the martial world, there's no longer any legend of this Tribulation Sword Master. Chuyang said. That's impossible. That's impossible. The three of them jumped up at the same time. Although they didn't know who this previous generation Tribulation boss was, and what kind of character he had, but how could a person who could become the Tribulation Sword Master and lead the Tribulation brothers to the peak of the heavenly realm be an ordinary person? How could a person who could achieve such a feat become a nobody? Not to mention other things, all the brothers knew very well what kind of person their boss was back then. He was definitely a man of great talent and vision, unparalleled intelligence, and unparalleled wisdom. He had exhausted all his schemes to achieve all these. Next, even if he wanted to dominate the martial world, it wouldn't be difficult for him. How could he be a nobody? It's a pity that this is the truth. An indisputable truth, Chuyang said. That's not right. Xianyuan Changkong frowned deeply. Even if the Tribulation Sword Master is no longer around, his clan must still be around. How could they disappear? Chuyang frowned. Indeed they didn't. Have you seen the previous Tribulation Sword Master's clan when you were around? I think I've only seen the Tribulation clan. Hearing this, the three of them were stunned. That's right, they fought every day back then, but they really didn't come into contact with any of the Tribulation Sword Master's clan. If it was really like back then, how could the Tribulation Sword Master not have a foundation to pass down his legacy? The three of them fell into deep thought. This seems like there's a problem? Chuzhang said solemnly. Let me continue. Unable to find a way to ask, that Tribulation strategist found another way and thought of ways to become a Dharma Supreme. He used the power of a Dharma Supreme to deal with the next Tribulation Sword Master who might appear. Finally, he waited. That battle wiped out all the clans in the three heavens on the heavenly level continent. Even all the martial artists in the heavenly level continent were affected. That was really an earth-shattering battle of the century, and it lasted for a long time. I can imagine. Xianyuan Changkong and the other two suddenly felt their blood boiling. There was a brother who was determined to go back and take revenge. In order to avenge his dead brothers and seek justice from the destined Tribulation Sword Master, he didn't hesitate to slaughter the world and bathe the heavenly level continent in blood. Although this didn't happen to them, just thinking about it made them so excited that their scalps tingled. And it was under such high pressure that the Tribulation Sword Master of the first generation struggled bitterly and actually broke through the last stage. Thus, he knew the true mission of the Tribulation Sword. At the same time, he also knew the tragedy behind all this. He knew the whole truth. Truth? What truth? The three of them asked at the same time. Yes, it's the truth. Chuzhang nodded slowly, and said with a hint of sorrow. The truth is, the mission of the Tribulation Sword. The mission of the Tribulation Sword? What does the truth have to do with the Tribulation Sword? The three of them asked one after another, their eyes widening. How can it not have anything to do with it? It's very important. The hidden mission of the Tribulation Sword is to fight the extraterrestrial demons. Chuyang said bleakly. The Tribulation Sword Master only knew in the end. The so-called gathering of the Tribulation Sword Masters was actually a selection. It was to choose the true candidate to fight against the extraterrestrial demons and quell the demons. He looked at the three of them and said, "Just like all of you, coming to the heavenly level imperial court, coming to the purple cloud heavens, guarding this fallen area and fighting endlessly." The breathing of the three of them became hurried in an instant. At the same time, she felt that her heart was suddenly lifted, as if it was being pulled out, and she almost couldn't breathe. "Actually, it's like this." Chu Yang repeated what he had said to Wu Jueqing back then in detail. He said, because the Calamity Sword had never found a person who was truly qualified to inherit its legacy, it fell into a cycle of reincarnation again and again. While the previous masters of the Calamity Sword did not meet the requirements themselves, their brothers had already fulfilled the conditions. However, he himself did not have enough strength to go up, and his brothers also could not go up. So, he could only choose to sacrifice himself. Let his brothers go to the destined place of the Tribulation Brothers to fight against the extraterrestrial demons. So the so-called tribulation mending the heavens wasn't to mend the hole in the sky, nor was it to extend the time limit for the heavenly calamity that was about to collapse. It was to quell the purple cloud heavens, Chu Jiang said slowly. But the three of them were already in a daze. Their eyes were blank and lifeless. Chapter 2434. Chu Yang's gaze was fixed on their faces. The three of them were completely unaware of this and continued to sit there in a daze. Golden robes. The sudden flash of golden light when the eyes were operating, the golden light from the bones when the enemy slashed his body. An almost indestructible body, was this the so-called immortal golden body? The minds of the three of them were churning like a tsunami. After the truth was revealed, that Dharma Supreme, who was also the previous tribulation, was deeply regretful. In the end, he perished together with an extraterrestrial demon that had infiltrated the Double Heavens continent. If it wasn't for his sacrifice, the Double Heavens continent would have fallen into the ravages of that extraterrestrial demon. Chu Yang sighed emotionally. That's not right. It doesn't make sense at all. Xianyuan Changkong suddenly raised his head and looked at Chu Yang fiercely. Even so, those previous tribulation sword masters didn't have to die. Reality is so cruel. If they didn't die, his brothers were destined to not be able to pass through that passageway. Chu Yang said quietly. They had to sacrifice their physical bodies, souls, and even the fate of their entire family to pour into that hole. In fact, when he killed his brothers with his own hands and used the most despicable words to provoke them, making them hate him, he was already dead. The one who was alive was actually just a walking corpse. After he collected the bodies of his brothers and buried them, at the latest, when they were halfway through the passageway, he would also throw his own body into the passageway, to complete the protection and construction of the last part of the journey. If he didn't do that, everyone's souls would only disperse in that passageway. Not only would they not be able to attain the immortal golden body, but they would all die in there and never be able to come out. The three of them sat there and listened in a daze. For a moment, the three of them seemed to have become three wooden statues. Their eyes were extremely lifeless. So this was the truth back then? We misunderstood Big Brother? Wrong Big Brother? In the silence, only Xianyuan Changkong's voice could be heard asking subconsciously. Then, Big Brother's family? When we left, the richest land on the continent was clearly inherited by Boss's family. Even if Boss is no longer around, shouldn't his family have inherited the land from generation to generation? I don't know about that. I only know that every generation of tribulation masters would establish a huge family and enjoy glory for tens of thousands of years. However, there has never been a legend of a descendant of the Tribulation Sword Master, not even one. Chu Yang smiled bitterly. Oh right, there's only one exception. After the 8th generation Tribulation Sword Master disappeared, his family also disappeared soon after. Only his younger brother and his younger sister-in-law's family were left. But this family was destroyed in the hands of Brother Tribulation's descendants. There's only Brother Tribulation's big clan in the world. There's never been a 10th super clan, Ka ka. The three people on the other side were gritting their teeth. Tears welled up in her eyes. Suddenly, boom! Yan Fei slapped on the table and yelled, "Those ungrateful bastards! How could they? How could they? How could they? How could they?" Xianyuan Changkong sniffed. His eyes were completely red, and his chest was still heaving up and down rapidly. However, he brazenly raised his head and locked his cold gaze on Zhang. "I don't believe what you're saying. How can these things be known by everyone in the heavenly layer continent? If what you've said is true, then it's undoubtedly top secret information. How do you know about it?" Chu Yang sighed deeply and said, "Your suspicions are very reasonable. What I just said is indeed not something that everyone knows. It is indeed an absolute secret." He smiled and said, "But I know it. Moreover, I know it completely." "Why? Give me a reason." Xianyuan Changkong's sharp eyes looked at Chu Yang. Chu Yang pulled Mo Qingwu over and smiled. "Because my wife's brother is one of the Tribulation Brothers. And he's the brains of the Tribulation Brothers." Mo Qingwu exclaimed and looked at Chu Yang. Xianyuan Changkong looked at Mo Qingwu and finally nodded slowly. Next, he didn't ask Chu Yang. Instead, he asked Mo Qingwu a few inconspicuous but crucial questions. However, these questions weren't a problem for Mo Qingwu, who was Tribulation's brainchild's younger sister. They were things that she had experienced personally, so she just told them the truth. Moreover, Xianyuan Changkong would never dream that this brainchild's younger sister was actually one of the Tribulations. A female Tribulation that had never been seen before. And she was the wife of the Tribulation Sword Master. It could be said that this brainchild's younger sister could answer the questions that Tribulation's brainchild couldn't answer, let alone some ordinary things. After asking a few crucial questions in a row, and being answered by Mo Qingwu fluently, Xianyuan Changkong finally gave up. He sat down in a daze as if his spirit was suddenly sucked out. The other two, Yan Fei and Yang Zong, were already dumbfounded. In front of Chu Yang and the other two, it was obvious that the three of them were trying hard to restrain themselves. However, their breathing became heavier and heavier. Finally, swoosh swoosh swoosh, a few lines of hot tears flowed down the three brothers' cheeks. They didn't say anything. They just sat there in a daze, crying in a daze. They didn't make any sound, but it was as if they were dead. Smack! Yan Fei slapped his own face hard and scolded. "Yan Fei, you're a bastard." This slap was so hard that his face swelled up instantly. Yang Zong also raised his hand, wanting to hit himself. However, after thinking for a while, he suddenly slapped Xianyuan Changkong's face hard. Boom! Xianyuan Changkong was sent flying. Yang Zong suddenly stood up and scolded. "What did I say back then? Fuck, it's you bastards who insisted that you were framed. Fuck, where did you get so many delusions of being framed? At that time, I said that maybe Big Brother had his reasons." "What did you say?" As he spoke, he suddenly burst into tears. He slapped his own face and cried. "Now you've hated Big Brother for tens of thousands of years, you've scolded Big Brother for tens of thousands of years. Do you feel good now? When you die in the future, how can you face Big Brother in the afterlife? Do you still have any face left?" He suddenly roared like a thunderbolt. Xianyuan Changkong fell to the ground, as if he couldn't stand up anymore. Tears flowed down his face as he said painfully, "Yes, I was wrong, we were all wrong." Yan Fei howled and cried, "You're tuning into the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.